Chapter 78. Song Jiwen pushed open the door and entered with the sound of keys clinking. The bedroom door was closed, but Poplar Fruit's roar came from the half-closed door of the study. How many times have I told you? You have to translate in natural language. Don't think of yourself as a translation machine. You have to be flexible, do you understand? Look at your dry translation. I think Guge's translation is better than yours. Song Jiwen shook his head and put the lunchbox in his hand on the dining table. Then, he walked to the study and knocked on the door. Guozi, I've put the lunch on the table. Hurry up and eat it. Don't let it get cold. Poplar Fruit shouted into the microphone in his headset and made an okay gesture to Song Jiwen. He didn't even have time to say thank you. Song Jiwen didn't mind. He was used to this kind of situation. He waved his hand and went back to his room. After Zheng Yujie went back, Poplar Fruit received the first draft of the book, which was more than 200 pages long. Unlike the other three translators, Poplar Fruit received the first batch of original manuscripts from the United States. Because he was the consultant and final reviewer of the entire team, he had to read all the manuscripts. In less than 2 days, Zheng Yujie told everyone in the group that the foreign copyright owner had notified more than 30 publishing houses in different countries and regions around the world. The book's release date was brought forward from March 6, 2012 to November 21, 2011. It felt like there was still plenty of time, but it suddenly became tight. In private, Zheng Yujie asked Poplar Fruit if they wanted to add 2 more translators. Poplar Fruit didn't hesitate and directly rejected the suggestion. Adding more translators meant more uncontrollable things. However, if they didn't add more translators, everyone would be assigned more tasks. Of course, the burden on Poplar Fruit's shoulders would be heavier. Every day, not only did he have to translate the manuscripts within his scope of responsibility, but he also had to collect the manuscripts of the other 3 translators to review and edit. Usually, he had to stay online and respond to the team members' questions at any time. He also had to hold online meetings with them every day to point out the shortcomings of their translations in the past day. Usually, Poplar Fruit was a modest and gentle person. However, this time, as the leader of the 4-person translation team, Poplar Fruit turned into a demon king. He was just like those famous movie directors. As long as he caught a repeat mistake, you'd have to wait to be roared at by him. Every time the team members had a meeting, they were trembling with fear. They were afraid of being roared at by Poplar Fruit. Even if they were separated by thousands of miles on the internet, Poplar Fruit's curses would still rain down on them. 2 of them were Ph.D.s and 1 of them was a graduate student who had studied abroad. In terms of academic qualifications, Poplar Fruit couldn't compare. In terms of age, they were also older than Poplar Fruit. In the beginning, they were very dissatisfied with Dongshan Publishing's arrangement. When Poplar Fruit criticized their translations, they secretly criticized him. However, after more than half a month of cooperation, Poplar Fruit convinced them with his superb translation skills and profound knowledge. There was nothing to say about the former. After all, compared to them, Poplar Fruit could be considered a professional translator. However, the latter was different. Every time they asked Poplar Fruit a question, Poplar Fruit could answer it quickly. Many of the questions couldn't even be found on the internet. However, Poplar Fruit was like an omnipotent encyclopedia. As long as it was a question in a book, he could answer it one by one. For example, when Steve Jobs was in high school, he once founded a club called Buck Fry Club. The translator who translated this paragraph couldn't figure out the meaning of the club's name, so he ran to Poplar Fruit to consult him. Poplar Fruit only thought for a moment before pointing out that Steve Jobs' name was actually a play on words. If the initials of the name were switched, it would reveal the hidden meaning of Fuck Bree Club. At that time, their high school principal's name was Warren Bree. After Poplar Fruit's miraculous answers several times, in addition to Tyrant, he also gained the nickname of Humanoid Valley Pigeon. In any case, the 4-person team continued to translate amidst the bumps and bumps. Although Poplar Fruit still took their manuscripts for refinement every night, the progress of the 3 was obvious to all. At the very least, Poplar Fruit was no longer as tired as he was at the beginning. What made the three of them even more impressed was that although Poplar Fruit spent time every day correcting their manuscripts and guiding them during the translation process, he didn't neglect his own translation. Relying on his understanding of Steve Jobs and his mastery of English, Poplar Fruit's daily translation volume was still a little more than the two people who did the most. On August 25, Apple suddenly announced that Steve Jobs had resigned as Apple's CEO, and the board of directors appointed former Apple COO Tim Cook as the new CEO. Tim Cook would take over Steve Jobs' throne. Of course, Steve Jobs' resignation represented the end of an era. This was a self-evident fact, but it was also difficult for many people to accept this news. Poplar Fruit and the others were shocked. People were concerned about where Apple would go without sect leader Joe, but Poplar Fruit and Zheng Yujie saw something different from this news. Sect leader Joe's days were numbered. In fact, sect leader Joe was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 2003. Although he underwent surgery to remove the tumor in 2004, there were still hidden dangers in his body. The history of Apple's rise was also the history of sect leader Joe's suffering from cancer. However, Apple's glory could not retain sect leader Joe's health. Sect leader Joe's health was deteriorating day by day. Every time Apple launched an event, Poplar Fruit could see his body becoming thinner and his face pale. Even in 2009, when Steve Jobs went on sick leave for half a year, he didn't really resign as Apple's CEO. This time, he actually put down the scepter of being the leader of Apple. This meant that his health was so bad that it was irreversible. Steve Jobs' life had entered the countdown. Poplar Fruit could almost hear the ticking of the clock, which also indicated that there was not much time left for Poplar Fruit and the others to translate. Poplar Fruit was like a clockwork machine, beginning to translate day and night. Poplar Fruit was now sitting in front of the computer, working non-stop in front of the computer, apart from his routine exercise every morning, apart from taking care of Kiki when she woke up, and apart from eating and sleeping, he didn't even have time to cook. For lunch, he ate the buns he bought in the morning, and for dinner, he waited for Song Jiwen to come back from work to pack for him. His original plan to go home had been cancelled. For the time being, he could only say sorry to his parents. When this was over, Poplar Fruit planned to go home and accompany them for a month to make up for his mistake of not returning home for more than half a year. To Poplar Fruit's relief, after a month of guidance and supervision, his team members had grown very quickly. Especially Guan Yanjian, who came back from studying abroad but was not much older than Poplar Fruit. Not only did he translate a lot, almost half of the three of them, but his translation skills had also improved greatly. When Guan Yanjian studied abroad in Australia, he majored in information technology. As a boy with a science and engineering background, he relied on his translation skills, which were honed by working in the subtitling team of American dramas for several months, to squeeze into the translation team led by Poplar Fruit this time. Indeed, in the beginning, he was the weakest in the team, and even reading thick manuscripts was very difficult. However, he was also the most serious and willing to spend the most time among the three of them. Every day, Poplar Fruit had to translate until late at night, because his body only needed 3 hours of rest to be refreshed. However, at 3 o'clock every night, Guan Yanjian would come to him with questions. Guan Yanjian's hard work, dedication, and conscientiousness really touched him. In private, during breaks, Guan Yanjian would take the initiative to discuss his translation experience with Poplar Fruit, and Poplar Fruit would often give him special treatment and train him very carefully. Every time Poplar Fruit had a meeting, he would say, "Steve Jobs is one of the greatest people in the last century and even in this century. After his books are published, there will definitely be countless pairs of eyes watching. Now, every inadvertent mistake we make, every piece of information we miss, every word we misread will be infinitely magnified. If you don't want to be pointed at in the future, and if you don't want to be criticized by people all over the country, read it seriously, and don't miss a single detail." Every time Guan Yanjian listened to Poplar Fruit's words very carefully, and these words were like a sharp knife hanging over his head, urging him to work harder and more seriously to translate. Although Poplar Fruit sometimes scolded him very harshly, the two of them still formed a deep friendship, and their academic pursuits made them appreciate each other even more. And under the guidance of Poplar Fruit, Guan Yanjian really became the best translator in the translation team, second only to Poplar Fruit. As for later, he became the left and right arm of Poplar Fruit to establish his own foundation, but that is a matter for the future, and will not be mentioned here for the time being. On September 20th, Zheng Yujie went to Poplar Fruit with a dignified expression, and told him that they had received another 200 pages of the manuscript that the author had revised and added. With another 200 pages, Poplar Fruit and the others felt that their heads were about to explode. Previously, they had thought that it was just the original manuscript with more than 400 pages. According to their rough estimation, they would be able to complete the task perfectly according to the plan. But now, there were more than 200 pages, which was almost half of the original manuscript. How could they complete it? Did they have to make Poplar Fruit and the others stay up all night? Poplar Fruit felt particularly stressed, especially during the online video conference. When he saw the increasingly thin and pale faces of his team members, he frowned even more. After this bad news was announced, everyone mourned. The only girl in the team even pulled her hair, indicating that she couldn't take it anymore. Seeing that the other two were faintly reluctant, Guan Yandian gritted his teeth and said, "Boss, why don't you give me 100 pages? I can still handle it." However, Poplar Fruit didn't want him to desperately stay up all night to rush the manuscript. Not to mention whether his body could handle it or not, how good could the manuscript be when he was extremely exhausted? In the end, he still needed Poplar Fruit to revise it. Wouldn't that increase his workload? In that case, it would be better to let him translate from the beginning. After some discussion, Guan Yandian turned over another 40 pages of the manuscript, while the other two took 20 pages each. Poplar Fruit took over the remaining 120 pages. Although it was a bit much, Poplar Fruit felt that it was possible to finish it if he worked overtime and gritted his teeth. The translation team also entered the final sprint stage. Sect leader Qiao didn't have much time left, but their task was still so difficult. But at this moment, no one dared to slack off, because they weren't competing with themselves or the publisher. They were fighting together with the tenacious and unyielding sect leader Qiao against the impending Grim Reaper and the heavens. Chapter 79. Yang Guo wholeheartedly wanted to translate his first book so that no one could find fault with him. Yang Guo was busy in his own house, but because of his sudden disappearance, some people were so worried that they couldn't eat or sleep. They looked like they were in a terrible fix. "How is it? Did you get in touch with Poplar Fruit?" Seeing the secretary open the door, Yarrow Dehua looked at her expectantly, hoping to get the information he wanted from her response. Unfortunately, the secretary shook her head gently. Seeing her like this, Yarrow Dehua sat back in disappointment. His whole body sank deeply into the back of the boss chair. He murmured, "How could this be? It shouldn't be." In August and September, Yarrow Dehua started the plan to expand his territory and was very busy every day. Poplar Fruit didn't log into the Gold Translator's account. He didn't know such important news until more than half a month later. Not only did Poplar Fruit not log into the Gold Translator's account, but he couldn't even get through to his mobile phone. After not being able to contact Yang Guo, Yarrow Dehua was dumbfounded when he held the phone. How could a person suddenly disappear from the face of the earth? The last time they met, Poplar Fruit gave Yarrow Dehua a very good impression. He was humble and polite, and his words and actions were methodical. The most important thing was that he was really very young. He was around 24 years old, and he was very knowledgeable. He was constantly improving. Even Yarrow Dehua, who often dealt with young talents, had never seen such an outstanding talent in decades. In time, Yarrow Dehua firmly believed that Poplar Fruit would grow into a generation of translation masters. If so, he would become a banner of the Cinder Translation Company. Of course, this would require the Cinder Translation Company to pay a certain price. However, to have a master translator in the company, how could Yarrow Dehua be stingy with such a small profit? But now, Yang Guo didn't even say anything and disappeared. What was Yarrow Dehua supposed to do? The company was now at a critical juncture. Although Poplar Fruit wasn't the most important part, the disappearance of Poplar Fruit was still a big blow to Yarrow Dehua. The secretary had come over to inform him to attend a meeting with several deputy managers of the Jiangnan branch. However, He found that the meeting outline he had written yesterday had fallen into the car. It could be seen that the poplar fruit incident had disturbed his thoughts. Fortunately, Yarrow Dehua's memory was still good. He could basically remember the content of the meeting that he had originally planned. Before leaving, he instructed his secretary, continue to call him. Let me know if there's any news. The meeting lasted for an entire afternoon. When it was almost time to get off work, Yarrow Dehua walked out of the meeting room, exhausted. Back in the office, Yarrow Dehua looked at his secretary, who shook her head apologetically. Still not working? Yarrow Dehua asked with a frown. Yes, the phone has always been turned off. The secretary nodded and said. Yarrow Dehua stroked his Mediterranean hairstyle and ordered his secretary, ask manager Wu to come to my office. Wu Pingzi received the notice and came to Yarrow Dehua's office. He gently knocked on the yellow solid wood door. After getting a response, he pushed the door open and entered. When he entered, he found that the entire office was filled with smoke. Yarrow Dehua was lying on the boss's chair, smoking. Several cigarette butts had been put out in the ashtray. He waved his hand and opened the window to let the wind blow away some of the smoke in the room. Wu Pingzi then sat down in front of Yarrow Dehua. He and Yarrow Dehua had been good friends for many years. He usually had to be careful in front of others, but he didn't have to worry about talking in private. He went straight to the point. What's wrong? Or is it because of that poplar fruit? Yarrow Dehua sighed. He put out the remaining half of the cigarette in his mouth in the ashtray and nodded. His disappearance this time is very strange. President Yarrow, do you think that other companies sent him to mess with us? Wu Pingzi touched his chin and said. It can't be. What can they do by sending poplar fruit? Yarrow Dehua shook his head and said. Poplar fruit's value was reflected in the future. His joining and leaving now wouldn't have much impact on the Shindar Translation Company's plans. Yarrow Dehua didn't believe that other companies would send such an excellent person to him just for him to enjoy. It wasn't worth it. The last time Yarrow Dehua met poplar fruit, he had a very good impression of him. If poplar fruit was really a spy, then he was too good at acting. He could even fool an experienced person like Yarrow Dehua. Yarrow Dehua relied on his many years of experience in judging people. He still believed in poplar fruit's character. But this time's disappearance was too sudden and too strange. He really couldn't figure out what the reason was. Forget it, President Yarrow, you don't have to worry too much about him. Let's wait a little longer. Maybe something happened at home and he can't get away. Wu Pingzi comforted Yarrow Dehua. Yarrow Dehua smiled gently and said, Old Wu, don't you think I'm old and stubborn? Why can't I get rid of this habit after so many years? Every time I meet a talent, I'm worried. Even when I was dating your sister-in-law, I didn't lose my appetite like this. No, President Yarrow, you're doing this for the company. Wu Pingzi smiled and said, look at the talents you've roped in these past few years. Haven't they all become the mainstays of the company? Isn't it all because of your repeated visits that we have the world we have now? Don't flatter me. The company can be where it is today because of your silent efforts. I've always seen it in my eyes and remembered it in my heart. Yarrow Dehua smiled. His tightly knitted eyebrows now relaxed a little. But, you gave me an idea. Wu Ping's eyes widened and said in surprise, President Yarrow, you want to go to his house? That's too low for your status. No, what if he gives you the cold shoulder again? Wu Pingzi strongly objected to this matter. The company was no longer a small workshop like before. It was already a giant in the industry. If the boss personally went to someone's house to invite an employee, it would be fine if it succeeded. But if something went wrong, wouldn't it become a joke in the industry? So what if he gives me the cold shoulder? It's fine. Whether it succeeds or not, I still have to give it a try. Yarrow Dehua raised his head and said firmly. Wu Pingzi sighed and said, is it worth it? Yarrow Dehua smiled and said, it's worth it. I believe in my foresight. Poplar fruit's future is limitless. I have high hopes for him. He patted the table and said with his eyes shining, then it's settled. Go back and help me check the address of poplar fruit's registration. Wu Pingzi couldn't persuade him and could only say, okay, I'll get little Feng to send the address to you. Chapter 80. After work in the evening, Yarrow Dehua called home and said that he wouldn't be home for dinner. He then drove straight to Poplar Fruit's place. Because it wasn't a car from the neighborhood, Yarrow Dehua spent a lot of effort and a pack of hongtashen to get the old guard to agree. But after entering, Yarrow Dehua realized that it would have been better to find a parking space outside. Why are there so many people? Yarrow Dehua frowned. His car was moving slower than a snail on the small path between the buildings. There were people coming and going along the road. Some aunties pulled their acquaintances to the middle of the road and started chatting happily. The path was not wide to begin with, so there was no way for them to pass through. Yarrow Dehua could only stop the car in front of the nearest building. He asked someone for directions and walked over. There was no elevator, so Yarrow Dehua went up the stairs. The corridor was narrow and old. It was the kind of stairs made of cement from the 90s. The surface was rough and uneven. There was a trash can at every corner. The residents' daily garbage was thrown in there. Fortunately, the property management cleaned it up in time, so it didn't emit the stench of garbage. But all of this made Yarrow Dehua, who was used to living in luxurious villas or high-end apartments, feel very uncomfortable. The corridor was dark and gloomy. Although the voice-activated lights above his head lit up when they sensed his footsteps, this kind of dim yellow light was particularly horrifying. Why do you live in such a bad place? Yarrow Dehua's heart was beating like a drum. He remembered that his secretary had told him about Poplar Fruit's income. Poplar Fruit's monthly income was more than 10,000. Who knew how many tens of thousands it was? Why do you live in such a bad place? Could it be that the address he filled in was fake? But since he was already here, Yarrow Dehua braced himself and walked down. After knocking a few times, the wooden door inside gently opened a small gap. Through the rusty iron door, Yarrow Dehua saw a head sticking out. From her hair to her face, Yarrow Dehua suddenly felt his eyes light up. The girl in front of him was so beautiful. Her beautiful facial features were so delicate that they looked like they were drawn in a painting. This made Yarrow Dehua, who was almost 50 years old, feel a little excited. But that was it. His own daughter was almost the same age as the girl in front of him. Yarrow Dehua had long passed the age of chasing girls. The girl's beautiful eyes stared straight at him, sizing up his sweaty Mediterranean hairstyle, frowning as she waited for him to speak. Yarrow Dehua understood and quickly asked, "Hello, is this Poplar Fruit's house? You're looking for Poplar Fruit?" Hearing this name, the girl's eyes seemed to flash. She asked, "Who are you?" "There's hope." Yarrow Dehua was overjoyed. He quickly took out a business card from his pocket and handed it over to the girl, saying, "I'm the general manager of Shindar Translation Company. I don't know if Poplar Fruit has told you that he's currently our company's gold medal interpreter." Speaking of Shindar, Duan Xueqing certainly knew about it. In the past, Poplar Fruit had even encouraged her to go there to earn money. However, she didn't lack that little bit of money. After registering, she would occasionally go up to take a look, or accept 2 missions to see if the knowledge she had learned in school had deteriorated. "Then you're Poplar Fruit's boss?" Duan Xueqing asked. "I wouldn't dare to be a boss," Yarrow Dehua said with a smile. "Our company aims to provide a platform for translators. We work together to benefit each other, especially for such an outstanding talent like Poplar Fruit. Our company attaches great importance to him. Rather than boss and employee, I think it's more appropriate to use the term partner." Hearing him praise Poplar Fruit, Duan Xueqing smiled and said softly, "I don't know why you're here. Poplar Fruit doesn't live here anymore." "Is that so? Where did he go?" Yarrow Dehua asked. "I couldn't get through to his phone before." "Oh, you're talking about Poplar Fruit's 157 number, right? Some time ago, he accidentally broke his SIM card, and has been busy recently. He didn't have time to fix it, so now I can only call the landline where he lives, and it often doesn't go through," Duan Xueqing said. She was a little depressed when she mentioned this. Now that her mother was home, she wanted to get closer to Poplar Fruit, but Poplar Fruit was too busy to pay attention to her. "I see. I don't know what he's been doing recently. I also didn't see him these days, so I came to visit," Yarrow Dehua said. Then let him tell you. I don't know if it's appropriate, Duan Shueching pondered and said. Well, I'll give you his current address. Yarrow Dehua saw her gently close the door, and then after a while, she came out and stuffed a note into the gap of the iron door. This girl is really cautious. She's still worried about me. She's so careful, like a little lamb guarding against a big bad wolf. Yarrow Dehua didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he took the note. Jinli District. He was familiar with this place. He had some friends who lived there. This was a few years ago. Yangcheng was changing with each passing day, and now the most popular district for the rich was no longer there. However, he still had some impression of this district. He had been there before, and it was quite clean. Compared to where he was standing now, it was heaven and hell. After thanking Duan Shueching, Yarrow Dehua hurriedly walked out of the building that looked like a man-eating beast. He ran to his car as if he was running away and drove away. This wasn't Yarrow Dehua being pretentious. It was easy to go from frugal to extravagant, but difficult to go from extravagant to frugal. This sentence could be used on most people. Yangcheng's roads extended in all directions, but during rush hour, there was still a problem of traffic jams. He was stuck on the viaduct, and he couldn't see the end of it. Yarrow Dehua had just opened the window when he heard the sound of horns. At this moment, the people on the road were all anxious. They had just finished a tiring day of work, and their wives and children had already prepared delicious food for them. Even if they knew that honking wouldn't work, they still couldn't help but pat the middle of the steering wheel. The air outside was scorched by the residual heat of the ground and the exhaust from the car. It was hot and smelly. Yarrow Dehua closed the window again. At least there was air conditioning in the car. He pressed a button, and a deep and melodious saxophone sound came from the high-end stereo in the car. The song Soulless Bridge, also known as Auld Lang Syne, was Yarrow Dehua's favorite. This song was already a classic, and with the saxophone playing, it became even more emotional. It was as if he was saying goodbye to a friend at a quiet and empty intersection. The gentle singing had a touch of sadness. Listening to the song and looking at the thousands of lights, Yarrow Dehua's anxious mood slowly calmed down even though his stomach was growling from hunger. He was now basically sure that Yang Guo wasn't lying to him to avoid him, but really had something to do. This also proved that he wasn't wrong about Yang Guo before. Since this was the case, why should he be anxious for a few minutes? Chapter 81. Why are you only back now? Poplar Fruit opened the door with Kiki in his arms. He turned around and went back in without looking up, asking, "Where's your key?" It was very late now, and Song Jiwen had yet to arrive. Kiki had already had her fill of milk, and Poplar Fruit had temporarily put down the work at hand to let his team members have dinner. However, he had nothing to eat, so he could only play with Kiki in the living room. Speaking of this, he suddenly realized something. He turned around and cried out in surprise, "Big brother Yao, why are you here?" He hurriedly let Yarrow Dehua, who was standing at the door, in. "You suddenly disappeared without a word, and I couldn't get through to you on the phone. Tell me, why am I here?" Yarrow Dehua changed into slippers and walked in. He patted Poplar Fruit on the shoulder and complained. Poplar Fruit thought about it carefully. Before turning to the project of sect leader Qiao's biography, he really hadn't mentioned it to Xindar. Moreover, there was a problem with the SIM card, so he didn't have time to get a new one. No wonder. Yang Guo apologized to Yarrow Dehua with a guilty expression, and went to prepare tea for Yarrow Dehua. Yarrow Dehua hurriedly pulled him back and said, "Why are you carrying the child? I have my own hands and feet. Do I need you to serve me?" Poplar Fruit could only give up. He carried Kiki, who had just drunk milk and was still very energetic, with one hand and pointed to the fridge with the other. "Big brother Yarrow, there are soft drinks and fruits in here. You can eat and drink whatever you want. Don't be shy." "I won't be shy. I won't be shy with a kid like you." Yarrow Dehua opened the fridge and squatted down. He picked out some food and said, "Today, you really screwed me over. You didn't even change your address after moving. You made me go to your old place for nothing." Kiki was also very curious. She craned her neck to see what Yarrow Dehua was doing. With one hand holding onto Poplar Fruit's collar, She leaned forward and almost escaped from Poplar Fruit's embrace. Poplar Fruit hurriedly hugged her and rubbed Kiki's little head. Her fluffy hair had grown a little longer, and it was very comfortable to touch. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Kiki, what do you want to see? Refrigerator? It's not like you haven't seen it before." Kiki was a little unhappy when she was pressed back into her father's arms. She pouted and looked at him with a little resentment in her eyes. But at this time, Yangguo turned his head to Yao Dehua and asked curiously, "Big brother Yao, you also went there? Then how did you find me? Are they my former neighbors?" Yao Dehua took out a bottle of Sprite and 2 apples from the fridge. He closed the fridge door and said, "A girl told me that you live here." "Girl? Who is it?" Poplar Fruit asked curiously. "A pretty girl who lives in your old house," Yao Dehua said. Poplar Fruit suddenly realized. "You mean Xu Etching." He thought that Yao Dehua had met the enthusiastic Liu Guilin and Fang Wenjing. Yao Dehua didn't continue to discuss this with him. He drank a mouthful of soda and said, "Poplar Fruit, why don't you turn on the air conditioner at home? It's so hot. There are children at home. It's not very appropriate to turn on the air conditioner, haha." Poplar Fruit scratched his head and laughed. "Brother Yao, come sit in the living room. It's very comfortable to turn on the fan." After sitting down, Yao Dehua handed a clean apple to Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit waved his hand and ate it himself. He was also a little hungry. Yao Dehua asked as he ate, "I heard from your friend that you've been busy with a project recently. I haven't seen you log in on the system for a long time." Poplar Fruit heard this and his mouth moved slightly. He hesitated for a moment. Yao Dehua saw this and said, "What's wrong? Is it inconvenient to say?" "It's fine if it's inconvenient." He waved his hand generously, but his eyes were still looking at Poplar Fruit's expression from the corner of his eyes. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "It's not inconvenient. It's fine to tell Brother Yao. It's just that this matter is still confidential. Brother Yao, just keep it in your heart and don't tell anyone else." "What's so mysterious about it?" Yao Dehua asked curiously. "It's the translation of a book. I wonder if Brother Yao has heard of Steve Jobs." Poplar Fruit said. "Steve Jobs? The CEO of Apple? Are you reading his autobiography?" Yao Dehua immediately understood after hearing Poplar Fruit's hint. Poplar Fruit was a little surprised. He asked, "Boss Yao, you also know about this book?" Yao Dehua raised his head and said, "How could I not know? Some time ago, it was hyped up and created a new crowdsourced translation method. The translation industry has long been in an uproar because of this. What do you think? You joined this project team. Do you think this model has any redeeming qualities?" After being in her father's arms for a long time, Kiki felt a little stuffy. She groaned and struggled with her hands and feet. Poplar Fruit had to move his body so that the fan could blow on her. Under the gusts of cool wind, Kiki finally calmed down. She laid on her father's shoulder and a few strands of hair on her head swayed left and right under the fan's blowing. Yao Dehua and Kiki's eyes met. He raised his eyebrows with interest. His eyes widened and he even blinked, wanting to tease her. However, Kiki was not interested in him at all. She just glanced at him indifferently and ignored him. She felt her father's heartbeat and slowly closed her eyes. Poplar Fruit pondered Yao Dehua's question. He shook his head and said, "This model is not good. The more translators there are, the more uncontrollable the translation will be. The quality of the translation will be uneven. If there is a good thing, it is that when training translators, we can use the crowdsourced model to let a skilled translator guide other translators. The effect is not bad. Through practical cooperation, they can learn faster. But this is not a new method. In fact, many foreign language schools have already adopted this teaching model," Poplar Fruit added. Yao Dehua's eyes lit up. He asked, "Wait, this model is effective for training translators. Do you mean on the internet?" "Yes, it's on the internet. As long as the translator in charge of guiding is skilled enough, he can guide several people at the same time. As long as he has a little bit of potential, he can learn in this practical mode and improve greatly. Of course, His future growth will still depend on his own efforts and ability to comprehend, Yonghua said. This is worth a try. Poplar Fruit's words gave Yarrow Dehua a lot of inspiration. However, these inspirations were still relatively fragmented. If he wanted to integrate and implement them, he still needed to discuss with several managers in the company. He then discussed some specific details of the crowdsourced translation model with Poplar Fruit. When it came to work-related matters, Yarrow Dehua was also in high spirits. The hunger in his stomach was also forgotten. When it came to the happy part, Yarrow Dehua was so excited that he almost jumped up. He laughed heartily and said to Poplar Fruit, "I told you that you are very good. You see, you are also one of the best translators in the country. Look, such a big publishing house like Dongshin wants you to lead the translation project team. Do a good job." Yonghua smiled and said, "I'll do my best. Currently, the other side is chasing me very closely. Recently, I haven't had time to deal with other things. So I'm really sorry for causing so much trouble to Big Brother Yarrow. It's nothing. Don't worry about it." Yarrow Dehua laughed and said, "You should read this book well. When the time comes, maybe Shindar will also benefit from you." Poplar Fruit sighed and said, "Brother Yarrow, to tell you the truth, I am not confident about this book at all. On the one hand, time is too tight. Everyone is desperately working overtime to race against time. On the other hand, it is crowdsourced translation. A book is divided among several people to translate. I am afraid the quality will be much lower. This book is the first book I have translated. I am afraid that I will mess it up. Recently, when I sleep at night and close my eyes, I always dream that there are readers coming to me with the book, saying that they want a refund if I don't translate it well." Yarrow Dehua comforted him softly and said, "You are putting too much pressure on yourself. Didn't you just say it to me? Every time, you will seriously revise the manuscripts that others turn over. With you working so hard, how bad can this book be? And you should also have confidence in yourself. You are our best gold medal translator. You represent the strongest strength in Guangdong province. If you can't do it, won't our Guangdong province also be unable to do it?" Yonghua was amused by him. He laughed and said, "Big Brother Yarrow, don't flatter me. How can I represent Guangdong province? How can I do that?" By the way, Yarrow Dehua suddenly remembered something and said, "When I came just now, were you waiting for someone to come back?" "Oh, I was waiting for my friend. He will bring me food when he comes back. Recently, I have been so busy that I don't even have time to cook." Poplar Fruit laughed and said, "Brother Yarrow, have you eaten? Do you want me to ask him to bring more?" Yarrow Dehua laughed and said, "I thought you were hiding a mistress in a golden house, and there are other girls living here. You don't have to trouble your friend. Let's eat outside. I used to have friends living here, and I still remember that there are several good restaurants nearby. Are you free? Are you still busy tonight?" Yarrow Dehua asked because he was worried that Poplar Fruit was still not free. Poplar Fruit laughed and said, "It's okay. There is still time to eat. Brother Yarrow, lead the way. Today is the first time you have come to my house. I will treat you." Yarrow Dehua said with a smile, "Then I will respectfully accept. I know that you are tall, rich, and handsome now. I won't make you poor. Haha, hurry up and let's go down. I am starving." Kiki had slowly fallen asleep while they were chatting. Anyway, they were just having dinner near the community. Poplar Fruit put her to bed to sleep. She followed Yarrow Dehua to a private restaurant on the street behind the community. It was said that the owner's ancestors were imperial chefs. The history was not known, but the culinary skills were really good. The soup was quail meat stewed with coconut juice, and it was particularly sweet and rich. The most famous dish was their partridge stew rice. The partridge meat was cut out and baked with fragrant rice. Before it was served, the whole aisle was filled with the fragrance, and it could be smelled through the door. Other dishes, such as stewed goose and pig feet, and beef with sour bamboo shoots, were also very delicious. Poplar Fruit and Yarrow Dehua ate happily, and the two of them chatted for a long time. For Yarrow Dehua, the happiest thing was meeting Poplar Fruit. His mood was finally lifted. Chapter 82. During the National Day holiday, the entire country was immersed in the holiday atmosphere. All the major tourist attractions were almost bursting with hundreds of millions of Chinese people. However, on this day that was supposed to be a break, Poplar Fruit and his 3 other team members didn't give themselves any time to relax. The ticking sound in their heads was like the sword of Damocles hanging over their heads. That trembling horse's manner was about to be cut off at any second. On the second day of the holiday, Zhang Yujie, who had been busy for more than a month without rest, started her vacation. Under the immense pressure, she was also working non-stop like Poplar Fruit. All she wanted to do was to complete this big project to the best of her ability. However, she didn't know what was wrong with her. It was rare for her to have a few days of rest. Instead of sleeping in at home in Beijing, she actually flew thousands of miles to Guangzhou and stayed at Poplar Fruit's house for the past few days. If everyone thought that a man and a woman living in a room together would have some kind of romance, then they were completely wrong. Yang Guo didn't have the time to think about women right now. Even if Zhang Yujie, who was so familiar that he could pinch juice out of her, walked around in front of him all day long in hot pants and a halter top, he was still indifferent. Zhang Yujie once tried to gather the courage to snuggle up to Poplar Fruit's back. Her soft and hot body was about to throw itself into his arms, but Poplar Fruit impatiently pushed her out of the study and closed the door. Zhang Yujie was so angry that she pinched the pillow in the living room and scolded him. Unromantic, blockhead. Zhang Yujie didn't know why, but after all these years, she just had to fall in love with Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit was indeed tall and handsome, but it wasn't as if Zhang Yujie had never seen a handsome guy before. Among the men who pursued her in Beijing, there were at least a few who were taller and more handsome than Poplar Fruit. Moreover, their family backgrounds and financial strength were miles ahead of Poplar Fruit. In terms of talent, Poplar Fruit was indeed not inferior to anyone, but others were also very outstanding. Several of them became the bosses of listed companies before the age of 30. Zhang Yujie didn't know what kind of bewitching potion Poplar Fruit had given her. The last time she came, she had only spent a day with him, but Poplar Fruit's figure had been firmly imprinted in her heart. But why was this big blockhead so ungrateful? Zhang Yujie thought bitterly. When it was time to sleep that night, Poplar Fruit consciously gave the master bedroom to Zhang Yujie. He slept on the sofa in the living room and even moved Kiki's crib out. Because Zhang Yujie was a delicate young lady who never did any household chores, Poplar Fruit even helped her wash her clothes, including her underwear. Although it was very embarrassing, Poplar Fruit didn't complain at all. Other than being busy and not having time to cook for her, Poplar Fruit was very considerate towards Zhang Yujie. However, the entire National Day holiday wasn't peaceful. On the 3rd of October, the second night after Zhang Yujie came, Duan Xueqing came to Poplar Fruit's house without any warning. Duan Xueqing originally thought that Poplar Fruit had been so busy recently that he didn't even have time to cook. So she went to the market to buy some cooked vegetables and came to Poplar Fruit's house to cook for him. But who knew that when she knocked on the door, she would see a casually dressed beauty with a hot body. Duan Xueqing, who had a faint smile on her face, immediately restrained her expression. Her whole person was like a big ice cube on Mount Tianshan, emitting a cold air from head to toe. She said coldly, "Who are you? Why are you here?" Zhang Yujie was also very surprised. The guest was actually an ice beauty, who looked elegant and otherworldly. This made Zhang Yujie, who had always been very confident in her appearance, become alarmed. She thought to herself, who is this woman? Could she be Poplar Fruit's girlfriend? That can't be right. Didn't he say that he broke up with his girlfriend? She also frowned and retorted rudely, "Ayo, such a big tone. You're the guest, aren't you? Who are you? I should be the one asking you that, right? Look at this time, it's already so late. Why are you suddenly so angry? What are you trying to do? Running to someone else's house, don't you know how to write the word courtesy?" Growing up in Beijing's alley, Zhang Yujie's mouth was very sharp, and the Beijing accent kept jumping out. Duan Xueqing wasn't good at arguing with others. She was so angry at Zhang Yujie that her pink face turned dark red. After holding it in for a long time, she said, "Someone else's house? Is this your house? If it's not my house, then is it your house? Look at what you're saying. Zhang Yujie felt a sense of crisis. She was implying that she was the mistress of this house. What are you arguing about? Xueqing is here? Hearing the argument outside, Poplar Fruit poked his head out of the study. Seeing that it was Du and Xueqing, he hurried over to greet her. Come in, come in. Since Poplar Fruit had already spoken, Zhang Yujie could only move aside embarrassedly. She flung her short hair and took the lead to return to the living room. Du and Xueqing's face was still cold. She walked in expressionlessly and didn't give Poplar Fruit a good look. Scratching his head, he was a little confused. Poplar Fruit introduced them to each other. Xueqing, this is Dongxin's chief editor, Zhang Yujie. She's now in charge of my project team. Because of work, she'll be staying with me for the next few days. Miss Zhang, this is Du and Xueqing, my junior. She's also an excellent translator. The two women had just met, but the atmosphere was already at daggers drawn. Even though Poplar Fruit was mediating, they couldn't be bothered to greet each other. Du and Xueqing wasn't good at mocking others. She just snorted coldly, expressing her dissatisfaction with Zhang Yujie's act of pretending to be the mistress of the house. Zhang Yujie couldn't be bothered to explain. She still harbored a deep hostility towards Du and Xueqing. She turned her head and pretended to look out of the window, but she was complaining in her heart. H. Junior, I know you're a playboy. You like young and beautiful girls. You're an old cow eating young grass. You're not a good thing. She completely forgot that her intention towards Poplar Fruit was also an old cow eating young grass. Standing in the living room, Du and Xueqing pulled Poplar Fruit's cuff, who didn't know what to say. She said, Brother Yang. Poplar Fruit looked at her with concern. He saw a bulging bag in her hand and quickly reached out to take it. What did you bring? Isn't it heavy? Come, put it on the table. Du and Xueqing was particularly happy with Poplar Fruit's thoughtfulness. She smiled sweetly and said, I brought some dishes for you. I'll cook for you later. Okay, the three of us will eat together. You haven't eaten yet, right? Poplar Fruit responded casually. Du and Xueqing's nose twitched. She muttered, but I only bought a portion for you and me. Who knew there would be other people here? You didn't even tell me. She didn't avoid Zhang Yujie sitting next to her. Who wants you to buy? Zhang Yujie stood up, took out her mobile phone and said, I'll order a table of dishes and ask someone to send it over. It's definitely better than yours. Poplar Fruit felt a headache coming on. Chapter 83. Hey, don't be like this. Poplar Fruit said weakly, if there isn't enough food, we still have eggs. We can make do with a few fried eggs. How can we make do with food? Zhang Yujie and Du and Xueqing said in unison. Although one of them spoke in a high-pitched voice and the other in a soft voice, their opinions were surprisingly consistent. As soon as they finished speaking, the two looked at each other and then fiercely turned their heads to the other side. Okay. Poplar Fruit scratched his head and didn't know what to do. Although he said that he had dated before, he had never faced two girls who were jealous of each other in front of him. Of course, Poplar Fruit didn't think that the two girls weren't happy because of him. He always thought that the two girls probably didn't get along and quarreled as soon as they saw each other. Now, both of them were embarrassed. Then I'll go cook, Poplar Fruit said. He rolled up his sleeves and was about to follow Du and Xueqing to the kitchen. No, Zhang Yujie saw this and put down her phone. She strode over and grabbed Poplar Fruit's arm. Her pretty face was tense as she said, You can't go. Why? Poplar Fruit was confused. Du and Xueqing stood there and looked at Zhang Yujie and her hand that was holding Poplar Fruit. Zhang Yujie hesitated for a moment before saying, You can't go, you have to work. At this time, she also let go of Poplar Fruit's arm. Following this thought, she continued to say, Don't you have a team meeting every day? It's almost time now, hurry up and go. Poplar Fruit looked up at the clock. It was true. Every day, he would have a summary meeting with the team before dinner to analyze the day's work and explain the problems in the translation manuscript handed in yesterday. But Poplar Fruit felt that it wasn't good to leave them outside the study. Du and Xueqing was a guest. It didn't make sense to let her cook for him, Seeing Poplar Fruit's hesitation, Duan Shueching couldn't bear to let him be in a dilemma. She opened her cherry lips and said first, "Brother Yang, if you have something to do, you can do it first. I can cook. Let me do it." "Okay," Poplar Fruit nodded and said, "then I'll trouble you." Poplar Fruit went into the study to have a meeting with the team members. There were routine roars and happy praises. After 2 months of bumpy running, the other 3 people in the project team were doing well. There were not many things that Poplar Fruit needed to worry about. At present, he only needed to spend time to integrate everyone's translation style, and he didn't need to correct their semantic mistakes. In and out, another hour or so passed. In a relatively small space like the study, even if the outside world was noisy, Poplar Fruit, who was 100% immersed, wouldn't know. However, what was certain was that there was almost no dialogue between the 2 women. When Poplar Fruit came out, he saw that they were still the same as before. They were 1,000 miles away from each other, and he couldn't look at them directly. When he came out, the meal was already prepared. Looking at the table, on the left, there were mushroom stir-fried cabbage, assorted shrimp, and edamame stir-fried beef. On the right, there were braised pork, sweet and sour pork, and fried fish. Some people might ask, why is it the left and the right? Because these 2 groups of dishes were placed on the table not next to each other, and the distance between them was enough to pull a horse for a walk. Without asking, Poplar Fruit knew that the 3 dishes on the left were brought by Duan Shueching, and the 3 dishes on the right were ordered by Zhang Yujie. Duan Shueching liked light food, and she rarely ate big fish and big meat. Even if there was meat in the dishes, it was chosen by Poplar Fruit. Zhang Yujie, on the other hand, was a carnivore. She used to live a luxurious life in Beijing, and she didn't like plain home-cooked food. After washing their hands and eating, Poplar Fruit was in the middle of 2 beautiful women. Zhang Yujie took the lead and moved her chair very close to Poplar Fruit. Under her proud eyes, Duan Shueching gritted her teeth and didn't show any weakness. Poplar Fruit didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he sat in the middle. Even though the fan was set to the highest setting, he was still sweating profusely. On one hand, it was because he was tightly pressed against them, and on the other hand, it was because he couldn't think of any way to persuade them. It was really awkward to be stuck in the middle. Picking up the chopsticks and the bowl of rice, Poplar Fruit called out to the 2 women, "Come, come, come, eat quickly. It's already so late. If you don't eat now, the food will get cold." Poplar Fruit thought that eating food and stuffing food into their mouths wouldn't make them cold. But he was wrong. After Poplar Fruit sat down, he felt more and more that he couldn't eat properly. Just as he raised his chopsticks, Duan Shueching and Zhang Yujie stared at him from left and right. Their eyes were filled with anticipation, and even a trace of coercion and threat. They wanted to see what he was going to pick with his chopsticks. The atmosphere suddenly became extremely bleak, and Poplar Fruit suddenly froze in midair. What should I do? His chopsticks were about to fall to the red braised pork, but Duan Shueching's beautiful big eyes were a little misty. Fortunately, Poplar Fruit was quick-witted. He picked up a piece of red braised pork and put it in Zhang Yujie's bowl. Then, he picked up a big shiitake mushroom from the dish on the left and gave it to Duan Shueching. He kept saying, "Eat. Why are you looking at me?" But how could the 2 women who were already fighting with each other give up so easily? What happened before was just an appetizer. The war had just begun. Zhang Yujie, who was bold and unrestrained, was the initiator of the war. She didn't listen to him and start eating. She rolled her eyes, lifted the hair by her ear with her left hand, and picked up a piece of sweet and sour pork ribs with her right hand from the plate for Poplar Fruit. She said with a smile, "Poplar Fruit, come and try my sweet and sour pork ribs. This is your favorite. See if it suits your taste." "What do you mean by your sweet and sour pork ribs?" Poplar Fruit kept complaining in his heart. The 3 dishes on the table, including Duan Shueching's, were all bought from outside. If he relied on these 2 women to cook, he wouldn't be able to eat anything tonight. Under her urging, Poplar Fruit had no choice but to pick up the sweet and sour pork ribs in the bowl and gnaw on them. Speaking of favorite dishes, Poplar Fruit didn't have any favorite dishes. But last time when he ordered takeout, the sweet and sour pork ribs in the restaurant were indeed the best among all the dishes, so Zheng Yujie thought that Poplar Fruit's favorite dish was sweet and sour pork ribs. Well, not bad, it's delicious. As a man who loved cooking, Poplar Fruit was never stingy with his praise. This sweet and sour pork ribs were indeed better than last time. Zheng Yujie probably ordered it from a big hotel. The taste, the heat, it was too much like a chef's cooking style. Really? Hearing Poplar Fruit's words, Zheng Yujie smiled coquettishly. She glanced at Duan Xueqing on the other side, picked up another piece for Poplar Fruit, and said, "Eat more if it's delicious." At this time, Duan Xueqing had just picked up the big shiitake mushroom that Poplar Fruit gave to her and took a bite. Seeing the Poplar Fruit praising Zheng Yujie's sweet and sour pork ribs and Zheng Yujie's proud look, the big shiitake mushroom, which was overflowing with juice and fragrance, tasted like wax now. Duan Xueqing lowered her head, and the front of her bangs covered her eyes, but the big shiitake mushroom, which was poked with chopsticks, hinted at her depression and entanglement. Duan Xueqing had been quiet and introverted since she was a child. Even today, when she took the initiative to buy groceries to eat with Poplar Fruit, it took her several days of struggle to convince herself to do so. But tonight, she didn't know what was wrong with her, but she couldn't control herself and was jealous of Zheng Yujie in front of Poplar Fruit. In the past, when faced with provocation, she had always been indifferent. She was such a cold and indifferent ice beauty, but her actions today had far exceeded her normal range. This was also the reason why she was hesitant. She couldn't accept such an intimate action of picking food for a man with whom she wasn't close. It could even be said that this matter had crossed her bottom line. But bottom lines were like records. Wasn't the purpose of setting them up for people to break? If the original atmosphere was as tense as before the First World War, then Zheng Yujie's glance was absolutely like the Sarajevo incident, quickly igniting the fuse of war. Duan Xueqing suddenly raised her head, stretched out her chopsticks, picked up a piece of white and tender shrimp, and put it in Poplar Fruit's bowl. Then, as if she had used up all her strength, she put down her chopsticks and lowered her head slightly. "You, Brother Yang, try my dish too." Duan Xueqing's voice was as low as a mosquito, which couldn't be heard. Poplar Fruit didn't see that Duan Xueqing's originally white ears, which were exposed from her long hair, had been dyed pink. Under the fine fluff embellishment, it was very cute. Good, good. Poplar Fruit certainly couldn't be biased. He also ate the dish that Duan Xueqing gave him. The taste is also very good. The shrimp is fresh and flavorful. It's delicious. Listening to Poplar Fruit's praise, Duan Xueqing blushed and lowered her head sweetly. Zheng Yujie didn't want to give up. She stretched out her chopsticks to the plate of fried fish and said, "Poplar Fruit, try my fish again. It's definitely better than those light dishes." Poplar Fruit didn't want to continue. He held down Zheng Yujie's hand and didn't let her pick for him. He said a little angrily, "Enough. Don't pick here and there. You still want to give it to me. Do you still want to eat? Don't pick it up. I'll eat whatever I want to eat. You guys hurry up and eat." Seeing that Poplar Fruit was about to get angry, Zheng Yujie had to take back her chopsticks and eat a little unhappily. After the meal, the three of them ate in silence. The two women didn't want to speak, and Poplar Fruit also enjoyed this rare free time. He even thought about his work just now. This sumptuous meal was finished in this strange and wonderful atmosphere. Chapter 84. After the meal, Duan Xueqing and Zheng Yujie stood there, not talking to each other, but occasionally they would make some eye contact. Zheng Yujie's eyes were full of provocation and impatience, as if to say, "The meal is over. Why are you still here?" Duan Xueqing, on the other hand, was cold. There was not much emotion in her eyes, but a kind of stubbornness was hidden under her long eyelashes. No one proposed to clean up the table, so Poplar Fruit had to stand up, pick up the bowls and chopsticks on the table, and walk to the sink in the kitchen. As soon as he moved, the two women stood up. Poplar Fruit quickly said, "Sit down, I'll do it, I'll do it." Poplar Fruit really did not want the two of them to get involved. Not to mention that they were not cut out for this kind of work, they were now at daggers drawn. If they quarreled while washing the dishes, no matter how many bowls there were, it would not be enough for them to fight. In fact, washing the dishes was not too troublesome, because the 6 dishes were packed. They put them on the plates in plastic bags, so the leftovers could be directly thrown into the trash can. The plates were still clean, so they only needed to rinse them with water. In fact, only the bowls and chopsticks needed to be washed. Poplar Fruit was very familiar with it, so he quickly cleaned it. Okay. Kiki woke up at this time, and Zheng Yujie carried her out of the crib in the living room. However, it was obvious that Zheng Yujie was too inexperienced in carrying a child. Her right hand, which should have been holding Kiki's little butt, was holding Kiki's calf. This made Kiki feel very uncomfortable, and she twisted and struggled. "Let me do it," Duan Xueqing said. "You do it. You know how to do it?" Zheng Yujie asked in a doubtful tone. "I will." Duan Xueqing was a man of few words and didn't want to say another word to her. Zheng Yujie pursed her lips. She didn't want to admit defeat, but Kiki was making a fuss. She had no choice but to hand her over to Duan Xueqing and muttered, "I don't believe you. What can a silly girl do?" Duan Xueqing ignored her and focused on taking care of Kiki. A month ago, Duan Xueqing's childcare skills were not much better than Zheng Yujie's. Both of them were acting recklessly based on their impressions from watching TV. However, Duan Xueqing was much better now. During this period of time, Poplar Fruit was not free. Sometimes, when Duan Xueqing came, she would volunteer to take care of her. Therefore, she had mastered the most basic skills of holding a child. At least, she didn't look as awkward as Zheng Yujie. However, it was too difficult for her to take care of Kiki, who had just woken up. As everyone knew, children were grumpy when they woke up, and Kiki was the most grumpy. She was very dependent on Poplar Fruit. In the past, she didn't even want to let anyone other than her father hug her. Now, she was a little better. She slowly accepted the hugs of people who were more familiar with her. However, she had just woken up and was in a daze. Subconsciously, Kiki still wanted to find her father's embrace. Only when she felt her father's familiar heartbeat would she be able to calm down. Although she had used all of her skills, Chichi was unwilling to stop in her arms. Her large, dazed eyes were about to be covered with a layer of mist. Duan Xueqing was a little unhappy, and her mouth slightly pouted. On the other hand, Zheng Yujie was gloating from the side. She almost sneered. Hearing his daughter's cries, Poplar Fruit hurriedly washed the remaining dishes and rinsed his hands. He didn't have time to find a clean cloth to wipe his hands, so he just wiped them on his clothes. He came out and took his daughter from Duan Xueqing's arms. As he hugged her and slowly patted her back, Poplar Fruit gently reprimanded Kiki. "That's Auntie Xueqing. Kiki, why are you crying? Isn't it good for Auntie Xueqing to hug you? Why do you insist on Daddy hugging you? Daddy also has things to do." Kiki's little head leaned on Poplar Fruit's shoulder. Although she didn't cry in the end, her little mouth pouted and she looked very aggrieved. After that, Poplar Fruit made milk for Kiki while asking Duan Xueqing about her plans. It was already very late. Although it wasn't like the school where the dormitory closed every night, if she didn't go back after 9, it would be too late at 10 or 11. As a girl, it was indeed a little dangerous. "Yeah, it's better to go back early. It's so dangerous at night." Zheng Yujie also agreed, but such words of concern sounded a little fake coming from her mouth. Duan Xueqing glanced at her indifferently. She didn't want to quarrel with her. In Duan Xueqing's eyes, quarreling was too embarrassing, especially with a thick-skinned old woman like Zheng Yujie. It was tiring and exhausting. Whether she won or lost, she felt that she would lose a lot of impression points. Poplar Fruit also sensed that something was wrong. He quickly tried to smooth things over. "It's indeed not safe at night. Why don't you sleep here tonight, Xueqing? The bed in the bedroom is very big. It's more than enough for you and Miss Zheng to sleep together. Chen PH, who wants to sleep with her?" Duan Xueqing snorted and said coldly. Zheng Yujie laughed and shook her head. "You don't want to sleep with me. Even if you want to sleep with me, I won't sleep with you. Hey, both of you, stop talking." Poplar Fruit shook the milk bottle and persuaded, "What's there to quarrel about? I'm just asking for Xueqing's opinion." Zheng Yujie said with some dissatisfaction, "Poplar Fruit, why are you still calling me Miss Zheng? Didn't we agree before? Call me Yujie. We're already like this. Why are you still so reserved? What do you mean by already like this? Poplar Fruit covered his head and complained. If she said this, people who didn't know the situation would think that Poplar Fruit did something to her. Anyway, you're not allowed to call me Miss Zheng. It's so unpleasant. Zhang Yujie glared and said angrily. Du and Xueqing stood silently by the side. Poplar Fruit didn't want to leave her out and said, Xueqing, why don't I send you back? Du and Xueqing said softly, there's no need. You're also very busy. The little girl said very considerately. Poplar Fruit said with a smile, it's fine. I also want to take Kiki out for some fresh air. She's bored to death from staying at home all day. Okay then, Du and Xueqing said. Although she was still indifferent, her tone was much more cheerful than before. I'm going too. Zhang Yujie jumped up from the sofa and shouted. What are you going for? You stay at home and look after the house. Poplar Fruit rejected. How could he let the two of them stand together? It was too annoying to quarrel. I won't go then. Zhang Yujie shook her head and sat back on the sofa to play with her phone. Although it was already night time, carrying Kiki and Du and Xueqing on the road, Poplar Fruit was still the couple that attracted the most attention. It was like a celebrity family going out. The man was handsome, the woman was beautiful, and they were even carrying a child. Poplar Fruit didn't just send Du and Xueqing to the entrance of the neighborhood to take a taxi. Instead, he accompanied her back to Du and Xueqing's place. Along the way, Du and Xueqing chatted a lot with Poplar Fruit. Although she was a girl who didn't smile much, Du and Xueqing couldn't help but ask about Zhang Yujie's situation. Poplar Fruit didn't hide anything and directly explained Zhang Yujie's situation to her. Although Du and Xueqing was still somewhat dissatisfied with Zhang Yujie's thick skin staying at Poplar Fruit's place, Poplar Fruit's performance along the way made her feel a lot better. At least, she wouldn't be so unhappy that she couldn't sleep at night. Chapter 85. Plans could never keep up with changes. This was an unchanging truth since time immemorial. Just like Zhang Yujie's originally planned National Day holiday, just like how Poplar Fruit's already tight schedule of translation, and just like how the whole world's plans to publish sect leader Qiao's autobiography were all disrupted by a sudden piece of bad news. On the 5th day of National Day, sect leader Qiao, who had been battling pancreatic cancer for many years, could no longer escape the entanglement of his illness. On October 5th, local time, he passed away at the age of 56. The official news was announced by Apple's board of directors the next day. However, Dongshin Publishing received the news on the same day. Everyone was shocked, regretful, and mourning for the passing of a great leader of their generation. At the same time, their hearts were in their mouths. Sect leader Qiao's sudden death meant that their previous plans had to be scrapped. Sect leader Qiao's autobiography could be said to be a literary work. However, in the hands of publishers and booksellers, it was an out-and-out commodity. Since it was a commodity, it had to be sold to realize its value. For a book that had become popular all over the world before it was even released, it was destined to be a bestseller. However, who could guarantee that it would continue to be popular forever? Everything had a freshness period. If they didn't push it out while everyone was paying attention to it, after a period of time, when everyone's enthusiasm died down, who would buy it? Especially sect leader Qiao. Even though he had passed away, there were still overwhelming news reports. This was all free advertising. In another 1 or 2 months, everyone would gradually accept this fact and their attention would be attracted by other things. Then, if they were to sell the book at this time, the results would definitely be much worse. After receiving the news, Zhang Yujie couldn't sit still anymore. She immediately booked the earliest flight back to Beijing the next day. Before she left, on the morning of the 6th, Zhang Yujie received an email from the United States. The United States had informed all publishing houses in the world that the publication date had been pushed forward from November 21st to the 24th of this month. It was another month in advance. In the email, the United States worriedly asked everyone if they could make it in time for the simultaneous publication. Because of the change in plans, They said that they wouldn't force everyone to follow in their footsteps. Before replying, Zhang Yujie asked Poplar Fruit seriously, "How much more do you have?" Poplar Fruit sternly told her that the rest of the manuscript would only be completed by the evening of the 12th if they continued at their current speed. However, Poplar Fruit hesitated for a moment before gritting his teeth and saying, "Don't worry, we'll work overtime and give it a try. We'll give you the manuscript before the evening of the 9th. Zhang Yujie nodded her head in satisfaction. Then, she got the publishing house to reply to the American side, stating that they would be able to launch the English version at the same time. Many countries and regions didn't hesitate to join the team with the simultaneous publication team. After all, the gimmick of simultaneous publishing was really a big selling point. It was something to be proud of to be able to enjoy the long-awaited masterpiece with a foreigner at the same time. Even the Apple's iPhone was not launched with the domestic market and Americans with the market. If someone else was already in the market and they were still taking their time, the customer's enthusiasm would definitely be greatly affected. Since they had agreed to the simultaneous publication, Zhang Yujie couldn't afford to delay any longer. She flew back to Beijing and immediately took a taxi back to the company. The company's French design director was originally overseas for a vacation. He was also on his way back. After Zhang Yujie returned to Beijing, she no longer pretended to be seductive like she was in Poplar Fruit's house. Instead, she once again showed her clean and neat look of a strong woman. Although she was young, she grew up in a political family. Under the influence of others, she handled things neatly and efficiently. As the date was suddenly brought forward, the company was suddenly in a mess. Sales and printing, review and editing, and so on. All the departments were red with anger because of the various conflicts and disagreements in the plan. As soon as Zhang Yujie returned to the company, she called for a meeting with the people in charge of each department. The meeting lasted from 2 in the afternoon until the next morning. All the disagreements were resolved in this meeting. She was swift and decisive. Immediately, a new detailed plan was drawn up and sent to the computers of all the employees involved in the project. The whole company immediately worked at full speed. The sales department held a meeting to reformulate a new marketing strategy. The advertising department also joined in the discussion. Time waits for no one. Taking advantage of this opportunity, they quickly responded. The promotion effect would be twice the result with half the effort. The editing department also quickly organized people to review and typeset the completed manuscript. They also made some minor adjustments to the original cover and typesetting style. On this issue, there was actually a small disagreement in the editing department. Some editors thought that it should be like the previous best-selling books, adding some celebrity testimonials and adding some gimmicks. However, some editors thought that the book should follow sect leader Qiao's usual style. It should be simple but not simple. They wanted to use a clean and tidy appearance and exquisite color matching and workmanship to gain the approval of sect leader Qiao's fans. In the end, Zhang Yujie decided to agree with the latter's opinion. A special situation should be handled in a special way. How could one achieve success by sticking to the rules? Not to mention Zhang Yujie's side, Poplar Fruit's side was also doing their best. First of all, Guan Yanxi was sick. In fact, Guan Yanxi had a fever on the 4th and was in a daze for several days. The efficiency of his translation was too low. Not only was it slow, but it was also full of mistakes. Poplar Fruit spent a lot of time editing his manuscript every day. With a headache, Poplar Fruit gave Guan Yanxi a day off to rest well and come back to work when he was completely recovered. After the other 2 team members heard the news, they also stayed up late with Poplar Fruit to work hard. For 2 days, they couldn't take it anymore. They weren't monsters like Poplar Fruit, who only needed 3 hours of sleep to be full of energy under the nourishment of internal cultivation. After staying up for 2 days and nights, they became much more haggard. Poplar Fruit couldn't stand it anymore and urged them to go to sleep. So, for 1.5 days, Poplar Fruit worked alone. He didn't even sleep for 3 days. He didn't even close his eyes for a minute. He relied on his willpower to hold on. The task was very difficult. He had to finish 6 days' worth of work in 3 days, and Guan Yanxi fell sick at the beginning. Fortunately, Guan Yanxi didn't let him down. After a day, he was revived and returned to the team. He was Poplar Fruit's right-hand man. When he was full of energy, he translated more than the other 2 team members combined. So, more than 2/3 of the manuscript was done by Guan Yanxi and Poplar Fruit. These days, he really didn't have time to take care of Kiki. Poplar Fruit even called his godmother over. Later, Liu Suqin laughed at him and said that not only did she take care of the little one, she also took care of the elder one. She was talking about Poplar Fruit, who was busy for 3 days. Poplar Fruit didn't have time to take care of his daughter. Kiki, who was most clingy to her father, naturally couldn't stand it. In the beginning, she would cry for a long time every time she woke up. Liu Suqin couldn't do anything about it. In the end, she still had to carry her to Poplar Fruit. Looking at his daughter's teary eyes, Poplar Fruit's heart softened. He hurriedly put down the work in his hands and hugged his daughter to comfort her. Of course, Poplar Fruit, who was worried about the manuscript, didn't stop. He coaxed his daughter while he translated the manuscript in his mind. He was half-hearted, which made Kiki very unhappy. Although she stopped crying, she still patted Poplar Fruit's chest unhappily. She even smeared her snot and tears on his collar. Poplar Fruit didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Hard work paid off. After 3 days of tireless work, they finally finished the manuscript on the 9th. Guan Yanxi even joked in the group, "This manuscript still has our body temperature." It wasn't appropriate to describe it as fresh out of the oven, but this manuscript was definitely their hard work. After handing in the manuscript, Poplar Fruit directly fell into bed and slept for the whole night and the whole morning. Ever since he started practicing inner qi, it was the first time he didn't wake up early. The exhaustion from 3 days of sleepless nights had penetrated deep into his bones. The rest was only temporary. As the highest level of English in the project team, Poplar Fruit still couldn't rest. He had to review all the manuscripts with the review team. The review team was responsible for checking if there were any typos, and he was responsible for checking if there were any inconsistencies or mistakes in the translation. The publication would be released simultaneously on the 24th, so the publishing house had to deliver the final manuscript to the printing house before the 14th. After the 14th, Poplar Fruit could finally breathe a sigh of relief. His task in publishing this book had come to an end. He had done all he could, and the rest depended on the market's reaction. As a translator, even if it was a book written by someone else, he would still see it as his own child after flipping through it. Parents always wanted their children to be successful, and Poplar Fruit also hoped that his child would be recognized by others and obtain good results. However, the waiting process was also unsettling. Through Zheng Yujie, Poplar Fruit received a lot of news, and one of them was sect leader Qiao's biography. The pre-sales online could already be described as explosive. No matter what, it would definitely be able to sell well when the time came. However, selling well didn't mean that Poplar Fruit's translation would be accepted by everyone. This was because the so-called good results were due to sect leader Qiao's fame, and it didn't reflect the quality of the work. Therefore, when he heard such good sales, Poplar Fruit didn't appear too happy. He was even a little worried. As the saying goes, it's hard to please everyone. 1,000 people would have 1,000 Hamlets in their hearts, and their evaluation of the book would be different. The more people bought the book, the more people would see the results of Poplar Fruit's translation. However, no matter how well they wrote, there would always be people who wouldn't like it. Chapter 86. Just as the entire Dongshan publishing house was making the final preparations for the release of the new book, someone sneakily looked up at the other colleagues who were busy walking around. Then, when no one was paying attention, he took a USB flash drive and copied several documents from the computer. At night, in a dark alley, 2 men wearing hooded sweaters on a hot day quietly met. The tall and thin one whispered, "Where's the information? Give it to me." His tone was hurried, as if he was afraid of being discovered. "Where's the money?" The slightly fat one said leisurely. "Your uncle, you gave me something. Do you think I will treat you badly?" The tall and thin one lowered his voice and said angrily, "Brother Gao, you didn't treat me badly before, but now it's hard to say." The fat one chuckled softly and said, "I know you don't have much income now, but I took a big risk by taking out this information, so I don't want much, just 50,000 yuan. 50,000 yuan? Are you trying to extort me? The tall and thin one's eyes were wide open, spraying anger in the dark night. Hihi, you also know, if this matter is traced back to me, I will definitely not be able to bear the consequences. If it wasn't for brother Gao taking care of me in the past, it wouldn't be this price. The fat one said. Where's the manuscript? Is the manuscript inside? The tall and thin one asked. There's no manuscript, I don't have this authority. The fat one shook his head and said. The tall and thin one said angrily, you dare to ask me for 50,000 yuan without a manuscript? The fat one said, hey, you still want a manuscript? Do you know what the consequences of cutting off other people's source of income are? When the time comes to investigate, you and I will have to go to jail for 2 years. Besides, can you afford to buy a manuscript? This information is up to you whether you want it or not, forget it if you don't want it. When he spoke, he tilted his head, not letting the tall and thin one see his small eyes that were still shining even in the dark. After hesitating for a moment, the tall and skinny man gritted his teeth and said hatefully, I'll buy it. That bitch Zheng must pay for it. I'm telling you, if I find out that this information is useless when I go back, you better watch out. He took out a few stacks of money from his backpack and handed them to the fat one. The fat man took the money and weighed it in his hand. He originally wanted to say a few words, but he swallowed his words. It was not worthwhile to provoke a mad dog. The tall and thin man's surname was Gao, and his name was Gao Feng. In fact, he used to be an editor at Dongshin Publishing. After the deputy editor retired, he was the most promising person to be promoted to this position. However, Zhang Yujie's sudden appearance shattered his dream of being the deputy editor. He came from the countryside and worked hard in a big city like Beijing for more than 10 years. He didn't get married and worked hard every day. He wanted to climb up and stand out, so that all the people who looked down on him before would worship him when they saw him. He had been an editor for more than 10 years and had won the appreciation of the retired deputy editor. The deputy editor had once joked that he would be his successor during a dinner party, which made him think that he could be proud of his success and reach the peak of his life. It was also because of the huge gap between gain and loss that he completely sank into the mire of revenge. First, he resigned in anger. How could he be willing to be under someone, especially a woman who was more than 10 years younger than him? Second, he sought revenge. After he resigned, he went to a small newspaper to be the deputy editor. However, the treatment of the deputy editor of a small newspaper was not as good as before he resigned. Soon after, he resigned again. The continuous setbacks in the workplace made him hate the woman who relied on the shadow of her ancestors to get to the top even more. It could be said that he put all his failures on Zhang Yujie. Since 3 months ago, he began to crazily look for opportunities to take revenge on Zhang Yujie. When his mentality was at its worst, he was like a mad dog. He was unhappy with everyone he saw and scolded. The fat man was one of his few friends in the company. They didn't lose touch with each other and would occasionally come out for a few drinks. However, the others were tired of the way the man with the surname Gao complained and cursed Zheng Yujie every time he drank too much. The fat man found an opportunity to make money from it. This was also the reason for the plot that happened before. The fat man didn't check the money carefully. He just casually took out 2 bills from each stack and rubbed them under the light of his phone. The money felt right. He nodded, took out a USB flash drive from his trouser pocket and handed it to the tall and thin man. The information in the USB flash drive wasn't actually a secret. It was just the personal information of Poplar Fruit and the other 3 translators. Dongshin Publishing had always kept it under a lid and kept it a secret. Ever since the news of sect leader Qiao's autobiography came out, the whole country was guessing. If this information was used well, it might be a huge blow to the new book that was about to hit the market. That was why the fat man was so bold as to sell this information for a high price of 50,000 yuan. After a long time of sitting and eating, the tall and thin man had already squandered most of his savings. However, he was eager to take revenge, so he still couldn't wait to buy it. One hand handed over the money, and the other hand handed over the goods. A deal that was as mysterious as a secret agent meeting was concluded just like that. The two didn't continue to chat. The fat man held the stack of money and went home with a face full of joy. The tall and thin man also tightly clenched the USB flash drive in his palm. He quickly walked out of the alley, called a taxi, and went straight back to his residence. The room was a mess. On the bed, on the chair, and on the floor, there were clothes that were casually thrown away. The beer bottles and cans on the table were crooked, and there was almost no place to put one's feet. The tall and thin man didn't care. He swept all the bottles and cans on the table to the floor with one hand. Fortunately, there was a layer of carpet on the floor. Otherwise, who knew how many beer bottles would have been smashed? He pulled out a laptop that he hadn't used for a long time from the closet. Like a headless fly, he searched for the power adapter that he didn't know where he threw it. After a long time, he finally turned it on. The laptop's fan made a squeaking sound, indicating that it had been in disrepair for a long time. However, the tall and thin man didn't care. What he cared about was the contents of the USB flash drive inserted in his left hand. He opened the information that was less than 10 megabytes but cost him 50,000 yuan. The tall and thin man skimmed through it 10 lines at a time. Gradually, his eyes became brighter and brighter, and the corner of his mouth pulled out a slanted sneer. "Hey, you're actually so bold. You even let me have something on you." The tall and thin man growled. "Fuck. Zheng Yujie, you stinking bitch, you're dead. Haha, you see how I'm going to make you suffer? Mph, you stole my future. You're just a useless bitch who relies on connections." Chapter 87. It had rained heavily in Yangcheng last night, and the air was slightly chilly. It helped to drive away the summer heat, but at the same time, it also brought a lot of trouble to Poplar Fruit. Shio. A short sneeze sounded, and Poplar Fruit hurriedly pulled out a tissue from the table and gently wiped Kiki's nose. Perhaps it was because she had grown a little and her body was more flexible, but Kiki's sleep at night wasn't as peaceful as before. She liked to kick off her little blanket in the middle of the night. Previously, when godmother Liu Suqin was still around, she would wake up several times every night to tuck in Kiki's blanket. However, Liu Suqin had gone back yesterday, and Poplar Fruit, who had just freed himself from the thick stack of books, took over the task of taking care of Kiki. Poplar Fruit, who was still a little absent-minded, didn't pay attention to this detail. In the end, after a storm, Kiki didn't cover herself properly and caught a cold. Early in the morning, she kept sneezing non-stop. Shio. Another sneeze. After sneezing too many times, Kiki was a little tired. Her little hand grabbed onto her father's collar, and her chin rested on her father's shoulder, looking very pitiful. Her big eyes were a little dazed, and her eyelashes fluttered lightly. 2 drops of clear liquid dripped from her little nose, and when she breathed, there was a slight sound of snoring. Poplar Fruit pulled out another tissue and wiped Kiki's new snot. After wiping too much, the tender skin under Kiki's nose had turned red, and Poplar Fruit's heart ached. Oh, right. Poplar Fruit threw down the paper box and took Kiki's little handkerchief from the shelf in the bathroom. He washed it in the sink, wrung it until it was half dry, and brought it to the living room. Using a little handkerchief to wipe Kiki's nose was better than using a tissue. After all, a handkerchief was softer and wouldn't cause as much friction to the skin. She had too much snot, so she needed to be hydrated. Poplar Fruit poured half a bottle of warm water for Kiki to drink. Kiki took the bottle and sucked it in big mouthfuls. It seemed that she was also thirsty. Yang Guo worriedly lowered the milk bottle a little, afraid that she would choke if she drank too quickly. However, after drinking the warm water, Kiki's spirit finally recovered a little. The frequency of her sneezing also decreased a lot, which made Poplar Fruit a little relieved. Poplar Fruit gently patted Kiki's little butt and scolded jokingly, "Little Kiki, you're naughty. You don't sleep well at night. Look, you're sick. Dad has to serve you the whole morning." Chichi didn't know if it was because she understood her father's gratuitous accusation, or because it hurt to be spanked by her father, but Chichi's little mouth pouted and she sniffled in grievance. Her 2 big eyes that were as black as pearls were quickly covered with mist, and then she began to sob. This time, Kiki's crying was different from the past. In the past, her crying could be described as loud and earth-shattering. But this time, Kiki was like a little kitten that was licking its wounds in a dark corner. She lowered her head, silently crying, and pouted her mouth high. That aggrieved look was pitiful. Poplar Fruit saw that. Oh no, he made the little ancestor cry. Poplar Fruit couldn't bear to see women cry, let alone his own daughter. Every time she cried, Poplar Fruit would empathize with her, and his heart would ache. Moreover, Kiki was still suffering from a cold. Her nose was already flowing non-stop, and now that she was crying, it flowed even more. Poplar Fruit hurriedly wiped away Kiki's tears and snot while coaxing her. Kiki used her actions to tell her dad that she was very obedient. Poplar Fruit only coaxed her for a minute or two, and she stopped crying. After her little face was wiped clean, she gently leaned under her dad's neck. Poplar Fruit's soft hair cushioned his collarbone. Poplar Fruit could clearly feel the softness of Kiki's hair. Poplar Fruit's heart was about to melt at this moment. He didn't know that the corners of his mouth were curled into a happy arc. Even the bright sunlight on the balcony seemed to pale in comparison. Poplar Fruit lifted his daughter a little higher. His chin gently lifted Kiki's little head, and his lips gently left a kiss mark on her forehead. Kiki also lifted her little head and used her delicate little face to rub against her father's big face. Although she didn't have the strength to laugh because she had sneezed all morning, her eyebrows arched, and the two clear crescent moons reflected her father's appearance. She had a sweet smile on her face, and she looked like a little angel full of love. With a daughter like this, what more could a husband ask for? Poplar Fruit only felt that no matter how many twists and turns there were in life, as long as he had Kiki by his side, his life would definitely be blissful. This kind of bliss couldn't be felt by those who hadn't personally experienced it. Perhaps they could only snort in disdain. This kind of bliss couldn't be described with words, because all words seemed so pale and powerless in front of it. This kind of bliss, perhaps only a great poet like Hazy could use the same beautiful poem to set it off from another side. Facing the sea, the warm spring flowers bloom. It was simple, but most people couldn't reach it in their entire lives. Coincidentally, it was the weekend. Seeing that Poplar Fruit was free, Song Jiwen started to be restless again. In the afternoon, he wanted to drag Poplar Fruit to play games. Poplar Fruit punched him and said in a bad mood, "Play, play, play. You only know how to play." Playing games in the afternoon was indeed not a good choice. Although Kiki was resting now, her cold hadn't completely recovered. She would suddenly sneeze from time to time. Even if Poplar Fruit was free to play, he wasn't in the mood to do so. He had to take care of Kiki. However, Kiki's condition improved greatly at night. Poplar Fruit was in a good mood, so he agreed to play Crossfire with Song Jiwen. Poplar Fruit hadn't played this game in a long time. Previously, Song Jiwen was too busy to play. Later, it was his turn to be busy. It had been almost a few months. Touching the Logitech mouse that was specially used for gaming, Poplar Fruit didn't know if it had become cold because he hadn't played for too long. During this period of time when Poplar Fruit wasn't free, Song Jiwen would still play a few rounds by himself when he was bored. However, in the first district of Shanghai, with Song Jiwen's standard, it was still very difficult to achieve results. Most of the time, he lost more than he won. If he met a professional expert, it would be a bloodbath. This was also the main reason why Song Jiwen wanted Poplar Fruit to play together. During this period of time when Poplar Fruit wasn't playing, Song Jiwen discovered a strange thing in the first district of Shanghai. There were many IDs that were very similar to their nicknames. For example, Strange Eagle Hero, Immortal Eagle Hero, Mysterious Eagle Hero, and so on. There were even Eagle Hero, Giant Eagle Hero. Even his ID was widely imitated. This phenomenon had been lively for a long time. At one point, it was so popular that you could see similar IDs in every room you entered. It didn't gradually disappear until the beginning of October. Song Jiwen had always been puzzled by this strange phenomenon. However, he was too lazy to look into it, so until now, he still didn't know what was going on. He once told Poplar Fruit about this matter as a joke. Poplar Fruit was very busy, so naturally, he just laughed it off. They didn't know that in fact, the instigator of this matter was themselves. This matter had to be traced back to 2 months ago at the beginning of August. At that time, they were weak against strong opponents in a game. They even turned the tables and defeated the veteran Team AC team in the 1st district of Shanghai. A motley crew composed of unknown passers-by was able to defeat AC team, whose lineup was almost complete and could compete for the Amateur League Championship. In that game, they had a teammate with the ID Big Dragon. This was his alternate account. In fact, Big Dragon was a very famous game video podcast in Youku. He attracted a large number of viewers with his witty ridicule and superb video editing skills. He made the 2 replays that he played with Poplar Fruit into commentary videos, in which he analyzed several sniping clips of Poplar Fruit that stunned the audience through almost movie-level recording and editing. Every time he fired, the audience could appreciate Poplar Fruit's operation of his character from many angles. He even made the shooting of the bullets to the enemy fall in slow motion. There was a famous saying in the NBA, "Everyone who watches a highlight reel is Jordan." It meant that even if a player was on the bench, as long as they were edited by a master editor, their own 10 best balls would look like a top-notch level. However, every ball was something that could only be found by chance in their career. Poplar Fruit was the same. His shooting skills, which were already very good, were edited by Big Dragon. It looked like he was at the level of the god of marksmanship. Moreover, he defeated AC Team, which was famous in the amateur world. This made the audience who watched the video exclaim, "The god of marksmanship is among the people." The video was first pinned by Youku on the main page of the gaming channel. Then, it was reposted by major gaming websites. The more people saw it, the more people discussed it. Later, some professional team members also joined in. Some simply thought it was fun and reposted it. Of course, they also said a few words of praise for Poplar Fruit's skills. However, some inexplicably jumped out and pretended to be the god of marksmanship. They criticized Big Dragon for over-exaggerating. They said that Poplar Fruit's skills were not at the level of a professional and that any professional sniper could kill Poplar Fruit. The first part of what they said was quite reasonable. Poplar Fruit's skills were indeed exaggerated under the editing of Big Dragon. However, they belittled Poplar Fruit's skills in the end. This made many players, who were happy to see Silk's counterattack, unhappy. They all attacked this professional player and for a while, there was an uproar. What really made everyone stop was that Bao Ge, who was known as the #1 sniper in the Southwest, came out. He posted 2 Weibo posts. The first one was to analyze Poplar Fruit's skills from an objective point of view. "Everyone, calm down. The Condor hero has fought against 2 of my teammates on the second team. I've also seen the battle replay. He's really good. It's not that he's particularly strong, but it's also not that he's weak and can't beat professional players. In terms of marksmanship, he's still a long way from the main snipers of several teams that can enter the CFPL qualifiers. However, even among professional players, he's still considered one of the best." Chapter 88. Bao Ge's second Weibo didn't hide his admiration for Condor hero. "Everyone, don't be blinded by the aura of a professional player. Professional players just have more systematic practice than everyone else. Many experts are actually hidden among the people. Hero Condor is the most skillful CF player I've ever seen in using a gun. Although he lacks some special skills, he has a lot of potential. If he goes through a period of training and competitions, he might become a god of guns. If he's willing to walk the path of a professional player, the door of Team 9 Springs will always be open for him." The praise of the Southwest's #1 sniper god pushed the ID Condor hero to the forefront. However, after Poplar Fruit played that game, he disappeared for a few months. Everyone messed around for a while and found that all the names that popped up were either Li Kue or Li Gui. Those similar IDs that appeared in the 1st district of Shanghai were all defeated one by the professional players who wanted to test the strength of the Condor hero and were forced to abandon their accounts. And the Condor hero pictures that were posted online often attracted the ridicule of a group of truth emperors. There were too many fake things, and people gradually lost interest in the once popular Condor hero. Thus, The matter gradually calmed down. When Poplar Fruit and the others went online and entered the room, no one was in the mood to greet them. Thus, Poplar Fruit and the others continued to be kept in the dark. Bang! An empty sound came from the headset. Poplar Fruit sighed and moved the mouse in his hand while quickly retreating to the corner. During this time, Poplar Fruit's left hand didn't become rusty, but his right hand wasn't as nimble with the mouse. Actually, this situation wasn't that hard to explain. When translating manuscripts, Poplar Fruit rarely used the mouse, but the keyboard was different. Often, Poplar Fruit's hands would fly across the keyboard, typing out long lines of words. The skills of his left hand didn't deteriorate, but rather improved. This was all subtly trained. The first few shots missed. Fortunately, under the control of his left hand, Poplar Fruit's movements were so agile that it was somewhat strange. Poplar Fruit managed to avoid certain death a few times. Even so, due to his numerous mistakes, not only did he indirectly cause the deaths of 2 of his teammates, but his own health was also almost depleted. What the fuck? A teammate began to complain. Do you know how to use a sniper rifle? If you don't know how to use it, then don't use it. Using the great god's name, he's playing so badly. At first, Poplar Fruit thought that he was talking about how famous the ID Condor hero was in the novel, but he ignored his teammate's accusation. First of all, it was true that he didn't play well in the first place. He let his teammates die because of him. Secondly, there was no point in arguing with his teammates. Strength came from real bullets. Compared to Poplar Fruit's mediocre performance, Song Jiwen exploded. His AK was very aggressive. From another direction, Song Jiwen had already reached the enemy's rear. From time to time, the words Condor Hero would pop up in the upper right corner of the screen. After one round, Poplar Fruit didn't manage to get a single kill. On the other hand, Song Jiwen had cleanly defeated the enemy. Of course, this had to do with the fact that the opponent wasn't a particularly strong player. The overall strength of this room was slightly weaker than the top players in the first district of Guangzhou. Poplar Fruit wasn't worried about his own results. It was impossible to recover all of a sudden. He would take it slow. After the first round, Poplar Fruit felt that his hand was still recovering a little slowly. Although he still managed to get a few kills in the end, these results were all achieved through fixed-point sniping. For a sniper, fixed-point sniping was the foundation. It didn't mean that one would be strong if they had a solid foundation. If they only knew how to do fixed-point sniping, then they would definitely be eliminated. In the second round, they changed rooms. This time, there were several people in the room with shiny team logos. It was obvious that they were experts. Poplar Fruit and Song Jiwen weren't surprised by this room. Instead, they were happy. A one-sided battle was meaningless. It was better to have a bit of a stalemate. Seeing the 2 of them join, a few people in the same team started discussing in their own team's chat. Fuck, my idol group. A member who had been shocked by Poplar Fruit's highlights said. It can't be real, right? So many of them have been eliminated. I think this pair is fake too. Hee hee. Then I'd rather end them and clear my idol's name. Poplar Fruit didn't know. He hadn't even started fighting yet, but he had already completely aroused the fighting spirit of the experts in the amateur team. The consequences were predictable. In the first round, Poplar Fruit had just come out of the spawn point when a sniper bullet came from afar. It hit Poplar Fruit's thigh unexpectedly. Poplar Fruit contributed the first kill in the entire game. In the second round, Poplar Fruit was surrounded by 3 people in the middle lane. He was depressed and fell to the ground again, becoming a spectator. In the third round, together with Song Jiwen, Poplar Fruit and Song Jiwen were targeted by the opponents. Wherever they were, it would be like a bonfire in the dark night, attracting countless mosquitoes. They were still surrounded in less than 30 seconds. Poplar Fruit was angry. Could they still play the game happily? Targeting like this, they didn't even want to win. You only want to kill the 2 of us? In response, Poplar Fruit's fighting spirit soared. He gritted his teeth and said in his heart, there's no enmity between us, yet you don't want to give us a way out. Just you watch. Watch how I, Poplar Fruit, kill my way out. A new round began. Poplar Fruit was highly focused. Under the stimulation of his rapidly secreted adrenaline, the feeling of his right hand holding the mouse disappeared without a trace. The first shot didn't hit anyone, but Poplar Fruit could clearly feel his hand returning. All that was left was to make some minor adjustments. It was the same as the previous rounds. Poplar Fruit had just revealed his head when countless people surrounded him. Poplar Fruit fought as he retreated. He used smoke and flash to delay the opponent's pursuit while looking for an opportunity to shoot. The second and third shots still missed. This increased the opponent's confidence, and they rushed out of their cover without caring about anything else. However, they didn't know that Poplar Fruit couldn't hit him because he had been shooting while moving. This sniper rifle had a much lower hit rate than a fixed-point sniper rifle. It was also very difficult to master. Poplar Fruit successfully lured the opponents out. At that moment, Song Jiwen suddenly attacked from the side. The camouflage AK in his hand poured out angry fire. After a round of bullets, the three enemies in the row fell like wheat being cut down. Only a few experts were smart and didn't rush out of the smoke to escape. Chapter 89. This time, Poplar Fruit had indeed used himself as bait to lure the enemy into Song Jiwen's ambush. However, Poplar Fruit was not going to give up so easily. He had yet to make his move. Picking up his beloved AMW, Poplar Fruit did not rush forward. Instead, he retreated to the corner and waited for the enemy to show himself. The remaining people were all experts. Poplar Fruit chose to snipe from a fixed point, which he had the most confidence in. Suddenly, a flash was thrown from the opposite bunker. It bounced off the wall and into the middle of the road. Poplar Fruit quickly pulled out his knife and dodged back. Song Jiwen, who could not dodge in time, was hit by a blank shot. Then, he shouted from the side, "Fuck, I'm dead." Poplar Fruit glanced at the top right corner of the map where Song Jiwen had been shot in the head. His heart was as calm as a serene lake. His left hand's 5 fingers flew across the keyboard. His character jumped out from the corner of the wall. He raised his gun and aimed in midair. The moment his toes touched the ground, he pulled the trigger. The cold bullet drilled out of the barrel and mercilessly pierced an enemy's chest. The enemy's eyes were filled with shock. He saw Poplar Fruit's shadow jump out, but before he could react, his consciousness began to fade. Yang Guo didn't stop. He didn't wait to pull out the shell. He pulled out the heavy Desert Eagle from his waist and continued to fire as he charged forward. One on the left. Poplar Fruit fired 2 consecutive shots. The first shot hit the enemy's arm, and the second shot hit the larger target's chest. Another one on the right. Poplar Fruit suddenly turned around. 3 bullets swept out. The first shot missed, but the second and third hit the enemy's chest accurately. 6. Where were the other 2? Poplar Fruit suddenly caught a glimpse of a small piece of cloth near the bunker that had thrown out the flash. He decisively turned and fired. The Desert Eagle's ferocious firepower created a fist-sized hole in the wall. Sand and stone flew everywhere, but the enemy had already hidden. After 2 knocks, only the sound of the hammer hitting the firing pin could be heard. Out of bullets. Poplar Fruit's heart tightened. The opponent was an expert. He should be able to remember how many shots he had fired. There was no time to reload. This was a critical moment of life and death. Yang Guo's heart was filled with a few words of classical Chinese. Instinctively, Poplar Fruit switched back to his sniper rifle. He did not even have the time to scope in. Relying on the Desert Eagle's crosshair, Poplar Fruit pulled the trigger of his AWM at the black figure that had jumped out. The enemy probably could not figure out how Poplar Fruit managed to pull out a sniper rifle and hit him in a situation where he was almost certain to die. Yang Guo didn't expect that he would be able to use a blind sniping technique that he had never even thought of before, despite how cold his hands were when sniping. He could clearly feel that the shot was not a fluke. He really relied on the Desert Eagle's crosshair to determine the direction of the muzzle and accurately hit the enemy. Everything happened subconsciously, but it was so clear that he could even trace it back in his mind. There was one more. Poplar Fruit nervously jumped to the side. He was about to reload his gun when the notification showed that the game had ended. What happened? Song Jiwen told him with a smile that the 8 players on the other side did not all move together. One of them ran to Zone A to surround the enemy, but was surrounded by his teammates. In the next few games, everyone played with each other and there was no longer a one-sided situation. Although Poplar Fruit had a flash of inspiration and used a difficult blind sniping technique, his hands were still recovering. There were indeed 3 or 4 strong players on the other side. They were all machine gunners. After seeing how strong Poplar Fruit was, they stopped underestimating him and started to play seriously. The one who benefited the most from this confrontation was actually Poplar Fruit. Because of the tense emotions, Poplar Fruit's recovery speed had significantly increased. After one game, neither side was satisfied, so they immediately started a new game. It was still the same players, but this time Poplar Fruit started to show his prowess. He started to use some tricks with his sniper rifle, such as a jump snipe and a flash snipe. He was able to achieve success again and again. This time, the opponents were starting to feel overwhelmed. The opposing team did not have a sniper lineup. At one point, one of the machine gunners switched to a sniper rifle, but he was defeated by Poplar Fruit in several games and had to give up. A lineup without a sniper was at a disadvantage in the mid-long range, especially in a map like Blacktown. Poplar Fruit's role was even more obvious. Many times, before they could even reach the defenders, they had already lost a few people. After more than half an hour, Poplar Fruit's team won the game without much difficulty. Poplar Fruit did not know that the opposing team was arguing because of him. A few people started to doubt whether the shining Poplar Fruit was the real Condor Hero. However, the die-hard fan of Condor Hero firmly disagreed. He protested, "Definitely not. Condor Hero is a sniper god, but he doesn't look like a sniper god. Is he good? I don't think so. If he's not good, then can you beat him? Who was the one who said he was going to teach him a lesson? I don't think his name is an imitation no matter how I look at it. I can't find any flaws in it. And I think he's really good. Then it can only be said that he stole Condor Hero's account. Condor Hero is 100 times better than him." The die-hard fan swore to defend Condor Hero's dignity and refused to back down. "What's there to argue about playing a game? Let's fight another round as soon as possible," someone who didn't help either side said. "What fight? We don't have a sniper on our side. We can't beat him at all," someone said gloomily. "It seems like the home team's brother Ming is online. Let him play. Chun, go and kick out a passerby. I'll let brother Ming join." The battle team they were in was a second-tier semi-professional battle team. The reason why they were called a semi-professional battle team wasn't because they weren't strong enough. On the contrary, their main team's strength was something that many second-tier professional battle teams didn't dare to underestimate. This was formed by a group of experts who didn't want to play as a professional. They didn't participate in the Grand Prix. Normally, they would substitute for leveling. Only in big competitions like WCG, CFPL, or team ranking competitions would they gather to compete with professional teams. Of course, it was unlikely for them to enter the finals of big competitions. After all, the strength of the dozen or so veteran teams was there. It wasn't easy for anyone to shake them. However, in team ranking matches, they were often ranked in the top 40 in the country. This was already very good. Brother Ming's ID was Rukawa Akira. He was the home team's main sniper. His strength wasn't bad, and he was also a well-known figure in the Circle of Travisses. On the 4th of the year, a CFR-themed website launched the Sniper God ranking. This ranking was based on the results of various godly IDs in the game and their performance in various competitions. This ranking was definitely different from the actual situation. On the Sniper God leaderboard, Dongjia's White Sand was at the top. This made the other Sniper God's fans very unhappy. This was because White Sand's contribution to the team was very high. However, when it came to actual strength, the top snipers like Marzi from Tsukuimi and 80 kilograms from Zhongjia could not be judged by a simple leaderboard. However, the difference wasn't too big. Just like how they weren't ranked first, their true strength wouldn't drop to the top 20. Therefore, this ranking was also a reference. Bao Ji, who previously supported Poplar Fruit, was ranked 13th. This was related to the fact that he had gradually faded out of the team's frontline and put more energy into the operations of the team. Rukawa Akira was ranked 45th. For a non-professional player, this was already a very good result. It should be known that their team's results couldn't be compared to professional teams. Originally, he wanted to play a few rounds. When Rukawa Akira received a call from his teammates, he happily agreed. With Rukawa Akira's participation, the situation tilted again. However, this time, it was Poplar Fruit's turn to feel uncomfortable. Rukawa Akira didn't go up against Poplar Fruit. From the beginning, he wasn't told about Poplar Fruit's strength. He just played according to his own ideas. In the end, one by one, Poplar Fruit's teammates were killed by bullets flying out of nowhere. The first one to be hit was Song Jiwen. Although he wasn't a professional player, Rukawa Akira was still someone who had participated in many competitions. He already knew all kinds of sinister corners like the back of his hand. Song Jiwen had just sneaked around a corner when he heard footsteps from afar. He suddenly dodged and fired. Before Song Jiwen could react, he was already dead. Without the support of his teammates, Poplar Fruit was fighting alone. He killed 2 people, but more people came at him. He could only obediently accept his fate. After a few rounds, Poplar Fruit's teammates were scared. They were all timid and didn't dare to rush out. They could only hide in their own half of the field. However, they weren't defenders. As lurkers, if they didn't attack, it meant that they were going to lose. Poplar Fruit couldn't stand it anymore. In this situation, someone had to stand up. Since the machine gunners were hiding in the back, then let him, the sniper, open up the situation. Poplar Fruit had a feeling that Rukawa Akira was strong. Although he hadn't been killed by Rukawa Akira yet, from his glorious kill count, he was definitely an expert. He was a cold-blooded killer like a king cobra. Therefore, Poplar Fruit didn't dare to be careless. He used a smoke bomb as a cover. After firing 2 shots, he quietly crept up from the side. Rukawa Akira was very experienced. He watched the smoke float for a while. After a long time, no one rushed out. He guessed that someone might take the side path, so he sent a teammate to watch the side path. At this time, Poplar Fruit jumped from the corridor to the side path. The moment he peeked out, he discovered the enemy. Chapter 90. Love at the Corner. No, it should be said that Poplar Fruit encountered obstacles at the corner. This was the perfect way to describe his feelings at the moment. Originally, he was supposed to quietly flank the enemy's escape route, but now, he had encountered an enemy guard. The enemy guard's reaction was not slow. A black shadow flashed at the bottom left corner of the screen, and he immediately turned around with his gun. Fortunately, Poplar Fruit had been vigilant. He jumped into the air and quickly switched to his sniper rifle. As soon as he landed, he scoped in and fired. Before the enemy could even aim, Poplar Fruit took the lead and killed him. Many people knew about this kind of blinking technique, but they could not learn it because the scope was held for less than 1/3 of a second. In that instant, one had to see clearly, aim, and fire. This required a very high reaction speed. As soon as the gunshot rang out, Poplar Fruit's position was exposed. The experienced Rukawa Akira immediately turned his gun. As he prepared to give Poplar Fruit a head-on blow, he slowly retreated and gradually hid behind the wall. After waiting for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, half a minute, Poplar Fruit still did not appear. Rukawa Akira frowned and felt a little uneasy. At this time, a notification that Poplar Fruit had killed his teammate flashed at the top of the screen. 2 seconds later, the notification popped up again. Another defender had fallen under Poplar Fruit's gun. It turned out that after Poplar Fruit killed the enemy guarding the path, he did not stubbornly follow his original route. Instead, he retreated and circled around to another enemy stronghold. Song Jiwen had already snuck up to the enemy. He waited for Poplar Fruit to get into position before throwing out his smoke flash. In the chaos, Song Jiwen deftly fired while moving between cover, attracting almost all of the enemy's firepower. Poplar Fruit calmly waited for 2 seconds. Then, He jumped out and took down an enemy that was frantically suppressing him. Based on his previous position, he went through the crates and killed another enemy. There was only one enemy left in the stronghold. However, when he saw how ferocious Poplar Fruit and Song Jiwen were, he rationally retreated while firing. In the end, he hid in a relatively safe place at the Guardian spawn point. After taking down a stronghold, the teammates began to get excited. They swarmed forward and squeezed into the stronghold. The person who was holding the bag quickly took the opportunity to grab the bag before it was time. Although the stronghold had been taken, it didn't mean that it was completely safe now. In the process of the lurker running from the middle road to the occupied stronghold, Rukawa Akira fired 2 shots from a distance, killing a lurker who was not paying attention to his position. After entering the encirclement, the lurkers switched from attacking to defending. Now, they didn't need to care about how many enemies they killed. As long as they were in good positions and looked after each other, they wouldn't let the enemy attack. They would win if they could drag it out until the encirclement exploded. However, there were a few teammates who didn't understand. They felt that they had a huge advantage after entering the encirclement, so they couldn't resist the temptation of the enemy's gunshots and rushed out while screaming. When one rushed out, a few others couldn't help but rush out. They did indeed kill 2 enemies, but the guardians who were approaching had already formed a circle around them. As soon as they showed their heads, they were met with a hail of bullets. It could be said that they were at a loss for 2 people out of 4. If they counted the side that was originally on the defensive, it was absolutely a loss for them. Bang! Poplar Fruit killed the lurker who had just slipped back into their base and wanted to take the opportunity to sneak up on them. When he looked at the data, a big drop of sweat appeared on his head. Originally, they had a small advantage of 7 against 5, but his teammates had forcibly turned it into a 3 against 3. Was this the legendary 50/50ths? There was no time to hesitate, because the enemy had already rushed in. Song Jiwen, who bore the brunt of the attack, gritted his teeth and spilled bullets from his AK. The flames from the barrel of the gun reflected his cheeks red, and the golden bullet shells clanged and clanged as they fell to the ground. However, the effect was minimal. The enemy rushed in too quickly, and 2 of them rushed in at once. Song Jiwen hesitated for a moment. The barrel of the gun swayed back and forth, unable to find the focus. His bullets only caused a little damage to each of the 2 enemies, but he couldn't kill either of them. Song Jiwen could only watch as the enemy steadied himself and then was shot in the head. Ah. Song Jiwen hugged his head with the headphones hanging upside down and shouted in annoyance. He wasn't depressed because he was killed. Song Jiwen knew that he definitely couldn't escape this calamity, but he didn't manage to kill anyone. It was a pity that he died. The second to be killed was Poplar Fruit's other teammate. After Song Jiwen died, he hurriedly jumped out of cover and wanted to kill him, but he was quickly shot by Rukawa Akira, who was still vigilantly standing at the door. The advantage became even, and the advantage became a disadvantage. The 3 of them occupied the crate. One of them opened the crate, and the other 2 covered. Even if Poplar Fruit had 3 heads and 6 arms, he wouldn't be able to turn the situation around. He killed one of them with great difficulty, and the crate was successfully opened by the enemy. Damn it! Poplar Fruit bitterly squeezed the mouse. He was originally destined to win. He adjusted his mood and entered the next game. In this game, Poplar Fruit was still the same as in the previous game. He wandered outside alone, and relied on his superior reaction speed to kill a few defenders. Then, he gathered everyone to attack the enemy's relatively weak stronghold. The plan was perfect, but in fact, in the end, there weren't many defenders left to defend the crate. Some of them were killed by Rukawa Akira, who couldn't restrain himself and fought with others when Poplar Fruit was shot from the back. When faced with an enemy with higher tactical literacy to counterattack the crate, the defenders with fewer people couldn't withstand the bullets coming from all directions. This time, they lost even more cleanly. Poplar Fruit suddenly understood why the defenders became so passive. It was because there was a very powerful sniper, Rukawa Akira, on the other side. If he didn't kill him, it was almost impossible for the defenders to turn the tables. But, could he kill Rukawa Akira? Yang Guo had fought with Akira Rukawa before, and it was under the effect of waiting for an exhausted enemy. As soon as Yang were fired, the other party dodged and then jumped out to pull the trigger. Fortunately, Poplar Fruit's left hand was very sensitive. He quickly tapped a few keys and pulled his character back behind the wall to avoid a bullet. Even so, Poplar Fruit was shocked. He saw that Rukawa Akira's marksmanship was very sharp. It was no wonder that his teammates' expressions changed. But Poplar Fruit didn't believe this. So what if he was an expert? Could it be that experts were invulnerable? He didn't believe it. The word retreat didn't exist in Poplar Fruit's dictionary. His stubbornness surged up again. The countdown to the next game began to flash. Poplar Fruit's heart was boiling with fighting spirit. He was waiting for the moment to start. He couldn't wait to challenge the best sniper he had ever seen in the game. Chapter 91. 3, 2, 1, 0. As soon as the time was up, Poplar Fruit ran out like a wild horse. This time, he no longer wandered on the path where few people walked. He wanted to have a fair and square confrontation with Akira Rukawa, so Poplar Fruit ran straight to the middle lane. For normal sniper players, the earlier they stood in the middle lane, the more initiative they would have. However, for snipers like Akira Rukawa, there was no such thing as first come, first served in the middle lane. This was because setting up a sniper in the middle lane was a bigger target. For a qualified sniper, changing positions after each shot was the truth. Poplar Fruit made this mistake. He had just stood in the middle lane and scoped in to wait for Akira Rukawa to appear. After a second, Poplar Fruit suddenly realized that something was wrong, but it was too late. A black shadow flashed in the upper left corner of the scope. Even with Poplar Fruit's fast reaction speed, the sniper rifle could only graze the corner of his clothes. There was no way to dodge. Poplar Fruit had just switched back to his knife when a bullet pierced his head. His body flew upside down. They had a bad start and lost the first battle. Poplar Fruit was a little depressed, but he wasn't discouraged like the others. Instead, he quietly waited for the next round to begin. It was still the middle lane, still the same gunfight, but this time, Poplar Fruit didn't stand in the middle of the road like a fool. He only peeked his head out from time to time and then retreated. Every time he peeked his head out, a bullet would follow him like a maggot. It would either hit where Poplar Fruit had just been standing, or hit the corner of the wall, making a hole and brushing past Poplar Fruit's face. Akira Rukawa's reaction speed and accuracy were obvious. Poplar Fruit retracted his head 3 times, but on the 4th time, he ducked and squatted down, using a small ramp to avoid Akira Rukawa's soul-chasing bullet. He didn't stop and immediately opened his scope. At the same time, he got up and pulled the trigger less than half a second after the scope was opened. Everyone had the same thought process. Poplar Fruit's previous 3 attempts gave Akira Rukawa the illusion that Poplar Fruit was afraid. Although he knew it was wrong, he still stopped for a moment after firing and didn't immediately retreat. This gave Poplar Fruit a chance. Poplar Fruit had an incomprehensible reaction speed. As long as he aimed and fired, no one could escape. It was the same for Akira Rukawa. Although the shot was too fast and didn't hit a vital point, the sniper rifle's bullet was set to kill in 1 shot. Please don't worry about the armor of RMB players in real life. Akira Rukawa was careless and was killed by Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit's killing of Akira Rukawa was a big blow to the defenders because Akira Rukawa was ranked high in the country. He could be said to be the god of war in their hearts. How could they not panic when the god of war was killed? But for the spies, this was simply a shot of adrenaline. Finally, they didn't have to be wary of that dreamlike character anymore. Under the leadership of Poplar Fruit, the lurkers blew the horn to attack. Although Akira Rukawa was still instructing the defenders on how to defend, under the strong firepower, Point A was the first to fall. Soon after, the defenders were taken care of by Yang Guo and his little companions one by one. This round was won cleanly and neatly. After this game, the situation was very clear. This game was not so much a confrontation between the lurkers and the defenders, but rather a showdown between Poplar Fruit and Akira Rukawa. In a shootout between the two, whoever won, the other side could almost be said to have won half of the game. You are very good. A sentence suddenly popped up on the game interface. It was Akira Rukawa's words on the public channel. Obviously, the you he was referring to was Poplar Fruit, who had just defeated him in a shootout. Thank you, you are also very strong. Poplar Fruit hesitated for a moment and typed in response. Again. Akira Rukawa said. His words were like gold, and he had the characteristics of a cold killer. The game started again, and the two once again came to the middle lane. Without saying anything more, they directly switched to the sniper rifle and started shooting. It was a bit like a one-on-one in basketball. The other teammates were very tacitly separated and did not create chaos for them in the middle lane. Poplar Fruit's reaction was very fast. At first, Akira Rukawa was a little flustered. He even hid behind cover for a few times before daring to come out again. However, Akira Rukawa was experienced. Although he did not dodge as fast as Poplar Fruit, his steps were very strange. 3 left, 4 right, 3 left, 3 right, 2 very irregular. Poplar Fruit found that his bullets were a little unable to keep up with his figure. Akira Rukawa was not only dodging, but he was also adapting to Poplar Fruit's shooting rhythm while silently counting down in his heart. 3, 2, 1, oh now. Akira Rukawa suddenly stood still and then picked up the cannon that had only fired 2 shots. When he scoped in, Poplar Fruit was hiding in the corner. The cannon was very heavy, but it did not hinder the speed of Akira Rukawa's sniper. Before Poplar Fruit could completely hide half of his body, the bullet had already caught up to him. Poplar Fruit only felt his body tremble as if he had been struck by lightning. The screen quickly dimmed. Dead. Poplar Fruit was a little surprised. He had already realized that changing bullets would bring him danger, but he still overestimated his dodging speed. Master, his strength is too strong. Poplar Fruit's eyes burst out, and his heart was boiling. It was rare to meet such a strong opponent, and it was rare to meet an opponent who could go back and forth with him and even lose more than he won. So what if he lost? I want to turn it around. Poplar Fruit's fighting spirit was even stronger. He was 120% focused. At the beginning of the next game, he stepped back into the middle lane again. Although Poplar Fruit's experience was far less than Akira Rukawa's, he had one advantage: he learned things very quickly. Akira Rukawa's footwork to dodge the bullets was dazzling, but it was not difficult for Poplar Fruit. With his extraordinary reaction and memory, Poplar Fruit could not only see clearly, but also form a 3-dimensional image in his mind to simulate. At the beginning, Poplar Fruit did not have the agile body like before. Instead, he staggered like an old man. He was trying to use Akira Rukawa's method of dodging bullets. Only Poplar Fruit would practice new footwork in such a dangerous situation. Only young Guo was able to dodge Akira Rukawa's bullets time and time again by relying on his slightly faster reaction time and time again. If it were someone else, they would not be able to learn well and might even lose themselves. However, Poplar Fruit still died. Because he had tried a few times and found that he was getting more and more proficient, and he didn't need to do extra dodging to avoid the bullets. He was a little proud, but when he was proud, he would get carried away. He kept tapping with his left hand, and one of his fingers accidentally slipped. He didn't press the right button and stayed in place. Akira Rukawa naturally would not let go of such a good opportunity. The bullet crossed time and space and penetrated Poplar Fruit's body. He helplessly fell down. Although he fell, Poplar Fruit was still in high spirits because he learned a footwork to avoid bullets. In the next game, Akira Rukawa would not be so easy. Was there a next game? No. If the lurker lost this round, Yongguo's team would also lose. The previous consecutive losses and the losses in the last few rounds had already reached the point where the game was over. Poplar Fruit was not willing to give up. He just exited the game and returned to the game interface. He typed a string of words: Akira Rukawa, let's play another game? Okay. Akira Rukawa responded readily. They were evenly matched. How could he not think the same? Not everyone was like Poplar Fruit, who was not afraid in the face of Akira Rukawa's tricky sniper rifle. Many lurkers left the room. After seeing a few defenders leave, Poplar Fruit's teammates jumped to the opposite side to hug their thighs. However, this was not important. Poplar Fruit did not care about the strength of his teammates or the other players in the enemy camp. He just wanted to fight Akira Rukawa to his heart's content. It was the same as the previous game. Poplar Fruit and Akira Rukawa fought happily in the middle lane. There were also some players who did not understand the situation and wanted to sneak attack in the middle lane. However, Poplar Fruit and Akira Rukawa would not let them do as they wished. When someone came, the two of them tacitly put down their guns and let the other side have the time to deal with the troublemaker. Yang discovered that the footwork he had just learned to dodge bullets not only gave him the convenience of dodging bullets, but also gave him a kind of reverse thinking. In the past, when he played with sniper rifles, the opponents he encountered rarely used their brains to think about what to do during micromaneuvers. They relied more on their instincts to control their characters. Therefore, when they dodged bullets, their movements were wide and wide. This allowed the sniper to often have a good effect when he sniped them. However, it was different when it came to players who knew how to dodge bullets. For example, Akira Rukawa had a completely different pattern when he moved left and right. It made it difficult to grasp the frequency of aiming with the sniper rifle, and the bullets would often miss. In this way, Poplar Fruit figured out a kind of reverse aiming method. He forced himself not to follow his usual thinking, but to change the direction of the sniper rifle. This way of playing made him feel very awkward, but the effect was surprisingly good. Since the second game of this game, Akira Rukawa had not been able to avoid Poplar Fruit's reverse sniping for 3 consecutive games. His consecutive losses surprised his teammates. Was this still the sniper king Akira Rukawa who had just defeated the lurker? Akira Rukawa realized that something was wrong and began to play steadily. He did not want to fight to the death with Poplar Fruit in the middle lane anymore. But how could it be that simple? At this time, Poplar Fruit had completely recovered, and was even much better than before. How could the crazy Poplar Fruit be avoided just because he wanted to? Poplar Fruit was not only constantly flick sniping and flash sniping, but also used blind sniping to kill an opponent using an M4A1 in close combat in special terrain. 3, 1, 4, 1, 5, 1. The defenders were getting more and more listless, and they could not find the rhythm anymore. On the other hand, the lurker was jubilant. The enemy was suppressed by their own sniper, and victory was in sight. But it was too early for them to be happy. Hey, where's Hero Condor? In the next game, the teammates realized that Poplar Fruit's character was standing still. Their charge was like a spear without a spear, and they could no longer break the game. We were about to win. Why did he disappear? Song Jiwen looked at the empty seat and typed helplessly. He went to answer a call. The whole team was cursing and swearing, and even Song Jiwen was complaining in his heart. Poplar Fruit, you're cheating us. This is the last public chapter. Xiao Han was still very sincere. Before the novel was published, he had already posted all the plots that everyone didn't like. As for the paid chapters, everyone could rest assured and read them. Xiao Han promised that there wouldn't be any more games or basketball plots. After writing for so long, the book was finally published. To Xiao Han, this book was like Kiki to Poplar Fruit. It was his treasure, and Xiao Han will work hard to make it even more exciting. I hope everyone will support him. Looking for first order, looking for recommendations, all kinds of requests. Omega Carat. Chapter 92. Even though everyone was looking forward to it, Poplar Fruit never returned. Everyone was desperately trying to break through the defense line, but the tragic ending was already set in stone. The defense line had successfully turned the table. Tricking a teammate was a matter that would make both humans and gods angry, but Yang Guo didn't have the time to repent for his mistakes. He had just received a call from Zheng Yujie from Beijing and found out that sect leader Qiao's autobiography was currently at the cusp of a storm. If they didn't handle it well, then they would face a truly tragic failure. Zheng Yujie's voice on the phone was trembling. It took her half an hour to explain the situation clearly. It turned out that a violent storm of public opinion had suddenly erupted on the internet this afternoon. On Weibo and forums, there were reposts of information about Poplar Fruit and the other translators. That's right, Poplar Fruit's age and qualifications had become the main target of the Internet Water Army's vicious attack. Especially Poplar Fruit. When he submitted his resume, he didn't fill in his qualifications at Sheendar Company. Therefore, he was still the same as he was half a year ago. He graduated from his undergraduate degree with mediocre grades. He didn't have any translation qualifications or experience as an independent translator. After working for a year, he left his job and stayed at home. The biography of a famous person that millions of people were looking forward to was actually translated by someone with such mediocre qualifications. It was really shocking. Not only that, but looking at the other people in the translation team, none of them were professional translators. One of them was even a science and engineering student. How could such a translation be convincing? At first, it was the Internet Water Army that came out of nowhere spreading the news. However, the news they brought out was really impeccable. There were even photos of Dongshin Publishing's stamped letter of appointment. Everyone accepted the news with some skepticism. Then, more and more fruit fans and sect leader Qiao's fans began to abuse and vent. Their love for Apple and for leader Qiao was so deep that they could not accept anyone tarnishing anything related to leader Qiao in the slightest. Not only did they question Poplar Fruit online, but they also expressed deep disappointment in Dongshin Publishing. They had already linked Poplar Fruit's low qualifications to the quality of his works. Some people even said on the internet, if you don't want to do it well, then don't accept it. You've translated it into a lousy work, and you still want us to pay for it. I'm telling you, I'm not buying anymore. Cancel the order. Under the instigation of a small group of people, there really were a lot of cancellations on the major online bookstores. The incident only lasted for one afternoon and one night, but the situation had become very bad. Whether it was Zheng Yujie or the management of Dongshin, they could not sit still anymore. They had to take action. The public relations department was taking action. Zheng Yujie finished the meeting in the middle of the night. She didn't have time to worry about disturbing Poplar Fruit. She quickly dialed Poplar Fruit's mobile phone and talked to Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit didn't know that his resume would drag everyone into such an awkward situation, but he understood that this was not the time to regret and reflect, nor was it the time to find out who leaked the secret. The most important thing now was to respond. He calmly comforted Zheng Yujie, who was a little flustered, and then said gently, "What do you need me to do?" Zheng Yujie hesitated for a moment, then said softly, "Can you come to Beijing? I want to hold a press conference to clarify in public." "Okay, no problem," Poplar Fruit answered firmly. The remuneration for the translation of sect leader Qiao's biography had been transferred to his card, which meant that whether the book sold well or not, it had nothing to do with him in terms of profit. But for Poplar Fruit, this book was like his own child. He wanted to protect it, just like how he protected Kiki. It was just a press conference, and Poplar Fruit was not afraid of those who questioned him. He wanted to prove to those who spread rumors and looked down on him that they were all wrong. After hanging up the phone, Poplar Fruit pondered for a moment, then he clapped his hands and stood up with a smile. Poplar Fruit was confident that he could deal with their doubts during the press conference. He would deal with whatever came his way. It was useless to be anxious now. Don't think that Poplar Fruit stopped learning after taking on all kinds of translation tasks. He still took some time out every day to further his studies. Although he didn't have time to learn other foreign languages in the past 2 months, in order to do better, he bought a lot of translation masters' works and theory books to read. It could be said that his understanding of English was getting deeper and deeper. On the other hand, after Zheng Yujie put down the phone, she could not calm down for a long time. Although things were not so bad that they could not be salvaged, she did not expect something like this to happen. Before this, the company had always emphasized confidentiality. So, even under the close attention of the media, other than the recruitment notice for translators posted on the translation website, the situation of sect leader Qiao's biography was not known to the outside world. But just a few days before the official release of the biography, the information of the translation team, which had been hidden under the cover, was exposed at such a critical time. It was not difficult to see that this was not a coincidence. There was definitely a mastermind behind this. It was just that they did not know whether the target of this incident was Dongshin Publishing or Zheng Yujie and the power behind her. No matter who the target was, Zheng Yujie would not give up. She picked up her phone again, walked into the office, closed the door, and dialed a number that she did not often call. When she returned to the study, Song Jiwen rushed over and grabbed Poplar Fruit's neck angrily. He swung Poplar Fruit around like a noodle. "Damn it, Laro Guo, do you have to be such a scammer? You took a phone call for half an hour and left all of us there. We were having a good time and were about to win, but in the end, the tables were turned. You are a scammer." Song Jiwen's anger level was off the charts. Hey, I have urgent matters." Yang Guo was shaken so much that she couldn't speak clearly. "Stop shaking me." Under Poplar Fruit's apology and begging, Song Jiwen finally let him go. "I need to go to Beijing," Poplar Fruit said after he steadied himself and straightened out his clothes. Looking at Song Jiwen's puzzled expression, Poplar Fruit explained, "Sect leader Qiao's book has some problems." Poplar Fruit briefly explained the matter. Song Jiwen had already thrown his unhappiness to the back of his mind. His face was full of worry as he said, "Can you hurry over now? You have to know that public opinion is very scary. If you don't handle it well, those people on the internet can drown you with their saliva." Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Since this matter has already happened, running away will not solve the problem. I have to face it and stand up to answer everyone's questions." He suddenly used his fist to lightly hit the wall. His eyes were full of confidence as he said, "The more they panic, the more I have to let them know that I am not the idiot they think I am. Don't worry. It's just a piece of cake." Chapter 93. After getting off the plane, Poplar Fruit carried his bag and went to retrieve the large luggage. Although it was heavy, it was nothing to Poplar Fruit, not to mention that it was pulled by a lever. Walking out of the corridor, the coldness of the airport's air conditioner brushed against their faces. Poplar Fruit quickly covered Kiki's body with clothes. It was easy for her to catch a cold due to sudden changes in temperature. Kiki had just recovered from her cold, and her body was still very weak. It was not good for her to have a relapse. Kiki, who was not sleepy, was very energetic. She sat in her father's arms and looked around. It was a new environment, and it seemed to be different from where she lived. The air, the clothes, and the appearance of people. Kiki's big round eyes rolled around, and no one knew what she was thinking. Lie down, lie down." Kiki waved her small hands and called out in a strange tone. "You have to call me Dad, understand? Dad, Dad." Poplar Fruit pulled the luggage forward and educated his daughter. The Yang-style recorder began to loop again. However, the teaching mode did not last long. Poplar Fruit saw Zheng Yujie, who came to pick them up from the airport. Wearing a black leather jacket and black trousers, Zheng Yujie stood there gracefully with her hands crossed in front of her chest. She was very tall even without wearing high heels. Her eyes could not be seen, but under her short hair, her delicate face was as cold as ice. This queen-like demeanor made many men who wanted to hit on her shrink back. Poplar Fruit was shocked. He had not seen Zheng Yujie for a few days. How did her aura change? It was like a strengthened version of Duan Xueqing. Could it be that the two of them had merged? However, their coldness was not of the same type. Duan Xueqing's coldness was an innate coldness, like a snow lotus on an iceberg, aloof from the world and untainted by the mortal world. On the other hand, Zheng Yujie's coldness was a coldness that was a mixture of pride and indifference. Perhaps this had something to do with her childhood experience. She could be so confident that she despised everything, as if she was the queen and the world should crawl under her feet. Seeing Poplar Fruit, Zheng Yujie calmed down a little. She wanted to take the luggage from Poplar Fruit, but how could Poplar Fruit agree? He was not even willing to give her the small bag in his hand. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "You can lead the way." Zheng Yujie stuck out her nose at him and shook her head handsomely as she led the way. Her long and slender legs were like pendulum clocks as she walked in large strides. In an instant, she had pulled a long distance ahead of her. Yang Guo could only smile bitterly as he jogged behind her. Could it be that Zheng Yujie's period came today? She was so irritable. It was better not to provoke her. Zhang Yujie was driving a white Maserati. The slender body of the car was very beautiful. It had an unusually distinct sports style and was decorated with a high-profile trident logo. It attracted the attention of passers-by. The luxurious interior of the car dazzled Poplar Fruit, but the most unforgettable thing was the sound of the twin-turbocharged engine when it started. It could make any man's blood boil. Even Poplar Fruit, who did not know much about cars, had the urge to play with it. After driving for a while, Poplar Fruit found out the reason for Zhang Yujie's bad mood. It turned out that during the few hours that Poplar Fruit was flying in the air, the Internet Water Army had finally revealed their trump card. They revealed information about Zhang Yujie, who was the deputy editor and the manager of the book's publishing project. They vaguely told the netizens that Zhang Yujie's family background was very strong, and that she had obtained her current position through improper relations. However, she had no ability, and stubbornly chose a group of hotheads to translate the book, which led to the failure of sect leader Qiao's autobiography. When creating a rumor, it had to be 30% true and 70% false. It was difficult to distinguish the truth from the lies, and it was the easiest to fool people. The netizens were convinced by this statement, and the spearhead of the crusade began to be pointed at Zhang Yujie. At this time, even a fool would understand that the real target of the whole incident was Zhang Yujie, not the book or anyone else. Zhang Yujie was not worried. She did not have the panic that she had when the public opinion exploded yesterday. Faced with the water army that would not rest until they had tarnished her reputation, Zhang Yujie calmed down. With a high position, one would inevitably become the target of public criticism. If one could not even handle a little bit of doubt or a little crisis, one would not be able to stay in that position for long. This was what Zhang Yujie's grandfather, who was in a high position, had said before. Although people from big families lived like princes in material matters, they were still influenced by the ups and downs of politics, even if they had not experienced it. Compared to the bitter struggle of the upper echelons, this little disturbance was really nothing. Zhang Yujie secretly cheered herself on. Wasn't it just the voices of others who were questioning her? She would definitely be able to get through it. The reason why she maintained confidence in herself was actually that she did not do anything wrong in this matter. It could even be said that her efforts were unimaginable. Not to mention that she used her family's connections to promote the publication of this book. Just the fact that Zhang Yujie worked day and night, working overtime, and doing her best to work on this book made her colleagues admire her. This was also the reason why her colleagues were still unswervingly supporting her since the incident broke out. Zhang Yujie had a rough guess about the person behind the scenes, but what was done could not be undone. The most important thing now was to solve the current crisis of public opinion that was getting more and more intense. As for the person behind the scenes, it would not be too late to slowly settle the score after this matter was over. For the next few days, you should stay in the hotel first. I have booked a room for you. Zhang Yujie glanced at Poplar Fruit from the rearview mirror, who was feeling around in the back seat. Okay. Poplar Fruit nodded in response. He was attracted by this car. In the past, he had only seen pictures of Maserati on the computer. Who would have thought that he would have the opportunity to sit in it? After this matter is settled, I will accompany you to walk around Beijing. I am too busy now. Zhang Yujie said. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, You don't have to accompany me. I am not here to play. Moreover, you have a lot of things to do. Just do whatever you want. Don't worry. In a place like the old capital, if you go out and walk around, you will either be tricked or lost. If I don't accompany you, who will save you when the time comes? Zhang Yujie said with her nose wrinkled. Ha. Poplar Fruit could only laugh dryly in response to Zhang Yujie's words. Do you like this car? Zhang Yujie looked at Poplar Fruit's infatuated face and asked. I like it. It is too beautiful. Poplar Fruit said without raising his head while drooling and touching the two-colored leather seat. Kiki's chest was pressed down by her father's chin. She felt very uncomfortable and angrily cried out a few times. She also forcefully patted her father's chest. Ouch, Kiki, use less strength. Poplar Fruit didn't feel much pain, but the feeling of his heart being shaken was still somewhat uncomfortable. He straightened up, grabbed Kiki's small fist, put it to his mouth and made a biting motion. He then stared at her and said, "Don't be so violent, do you hear me? In the future, if you hit Daddy again, Daddy will eat you." Kiki didn't hold back and stared at him. However, a smile slowly appeared on her face and she completely ignored her father's threat. Poplar Fruit was angry and amused. He really didn't know what to do with her. "Then you can drive this car for the next few days." "I still have a car," Zhang Yujie said. Poplar Fruit was surprised and said with a smile, "No need. I have to take care of the child now. It is inconvenient to drive. I will just take a taxi." "It is not that easy to call a taxi in Beijing," Zhang Yujie said. "It is okay. There must be a lot of taxis next to the hotel. Besides, even if you drive for me, I am not familiar with the roads in Beijing." Poplar Fruit laughed. "If you don't want it, then forget it. Really, I only let you play with it because you like it so much." Zhang Yujie pouted and said. This car was indeed her favorite. Not to mention her friends, even her younger brother had not been able to touch this car of hers. Seeing this, Poplar Fruit quickly moved his head through the gap in the middle and said with a smile, "Don't be angry. I appreciate your kindness. I like this car very much, but I really can't drive it. Why don't you drive me around more in the future?" Zhang Yujie patted him on the head, and a smile appeared on her lips under the sunglasses. Her cold face softened as if ice and snow had just melted. She said angrily, "Who wants to be your driver? When the time comes, you will drive for me." When they arrived at the hotel, Poplar Fruit had never heard of the name Beijing Guest Hotel. However, he found that Zhang Yujie had booked a very luxurious suite for him. It cost 888 yuan a day. Poplar Fruit pulled her and said, "Yujie, why did you book such an expensive room? You could have just booked a single room. If I tell you to stay, then stay." Zhang Yujie, who took off her sunglasses, glared at him and said, "This is the hotel we booked. We don't need to spend so much money to book a room. Don't worry." Poplar Fruit had to follow her in. The waiter behind them helped to drag the suitcase in. This luxurious suite had a living room and a bedroom. The living room was filled with exquisite furniture. There was also a table for guests to order food in the room. Pulling open the curtains of the living room, Poplar Fruit found that this was a floor-to-ceiling window wall. Looking out from the 16th floor, he felt that the scenery of Beijing was bustling and lively. If he looked at it again at night, it would be a beautiful night scene painted with neon lights. After sending the waiter away, Zhang Yujie said, "I will arrange a press conference tomorrow. What do you think? Is it too late to prepare?" Poplar Fruit pointed to his head and said with a smile, "No problem. All the questions they will ask and what I want to say are already here. Well, at that time, I will arrange a session for you to answer a question from a professor from Beijing Foreign Studies University. I will show you the outline tonight. You should also prepare how to answer it," Zhang Yujie said. Her beautiful eyes were fixed on Poplar Fruit. She was worried that Poplar Fruit would be unhappy with her arrangement. Poplar Fruit noticed her expression. He smiled and said, "Don't worry. Leave the press conference to me. You have to have confidence in me." Chapter 94. Zhang Yujie sat down on the sofa and leaned against Poplar Fruit. She put her hands on her knees and straightened her legs, looking like she was stretching. She said, "I have faith in you. I always have." Yes, Zhang Yujie had pinned all her hopes on Poplar Fruit. Although she didn't say it, she was hoping that Poplar Fruit would be like a fairy tale, riding a white horse from afar and saving her from the fire and water. After sending the waiter away, Poplar Fruit started to pack up, but Zhang Yujie wasn't in a hurry to leave. She poured herself a glass of water and then buried herself in the soft sofa again. She looked at Poplar Fruit with satisfaction and sweetness as he took out the things in the big suitcase one by one. Zhang Yujie felt that she was a little infatuated with the feeling of being by Poplar Fruit's side. She didn't know why, but as long as Poplar Fruit was by her side, she would feel especially at ease and her thoughts would be very clear. No matter how many grievances she went through outside, no matter how much wind and rain she went through, when she saw Poplar Fruit, all the negative emotions would vanish. Yes, his face was so handsome, his voice was so gentle, his chest was so broad, and even the way he carried things was so charming. She really liked the way he bent down and stood up. Milk powder, diapers, diapers, children's clothes, children's clothes, children's clothes, no. Why were they all children's things? Zheng Yujie felt that something was wrong. She stood up and strode over to Poplar Fruit's side and peeked her head out to look at the suitcase. Kiki, who was on Poplar Fruit's back, was startled by her quick movements. Kiki looked up in surprise and stared at her blankly. Where are your clothes? Zheng Yujie stared at Poplar Fruit and asked. Aren't my clothes there? Poplar Fruit gestured with his hand and pointed at a small pile of clothes at the back of the big suitcase. Zheng Yujie lowered her head and covered her forehead with her left hand. Her head was full of black lines. She shouted in a low voice, Yang Xiaogua, I'm asking you where's your formal wear? She almost pulled her hair and went crazy. Can't I wear casual wear? Poplar Fruit said, blushing with shame. He did have a set of formal wear, which was the one he wore to the blind date. However, one day when he was feeding Chichi, he accidentally knocked it over and spilled milk all over it. He didn't have the time to dry clean it, so it was covered in white stains. Moreover, this formal wear didn't fit him anymore. Yang Gua thought that he wouldn't have many chances to wear it, so he didn't wash it. Thus, he didn't bring it with him this time. Of course not. Zheng Yujie really wanted to pinch Poplar Fruit's ears to see what was in his head. Who had he seen wearing wrinkled casual pants at a press conference? Let's go, I'll take you to buy clothes. Alright, Zheng Yujie found that she couldn't just leave him like this. Thus, she pulled Poplar Fruit out of the door without any explanation. Driving her flashy Maserati, she did a beautiful drift around the corner and found a parking lot to park her car. The two of them took a Xiaoduan road before arriving at their destination, Jiji Building. It was a large building that occupied a vast area. Looking from afar, it looked like a majestic castle. It occupied 2 streets, and both sides were surrounded by slightly undulating, wavy walls made of glass. The front of the building was at the corner of the street, and the signboard was hung big, with the words Lotte Antime Department Store written on it. Let's go. Zheng Yujie pulled Poplar Fruit's hand and dragged him forward. In order to keep up with her, Poplar Fruit had to give up looking left and right and strode forward. Although the two of them were walking parallel to each other, Zheng Yujie didn't have the slightest intention of letting go. She still used her warm and soft hand to hold Poplar Fruit's 4 fingers and pretended to walk forward naturally. However, her shoulders were very stiff. If someone paid attention, they would be able to see through her thoughts. Poplar Fruit didn't pay attention. He saw that there were many clothing stores in the building, and many of them were selling suits. He asked curiously, Yujie, there's something to buy over there. Let's go there. We're not going to those cheap stores. Zheng Yujie took a look and pulled Poplar Fruit. Let's go upstairs. Cheap. Poplar Fruit thought as a drop of cold sweat dripped down his forehead. Looking at the decorations of those stores, it would cost at least a few thousand yuan to walk in. If this was considered cheap, then what level of quality would the non-cheap stores be? Being pulled by Zheng Yujie, Poplar Fruit could only blindly follow behind. The two of them came to a very fashionable clothing store. The store was very large, so large that one could hang a large piece of clothing. Bright lights shone in every corner. Only when one walked in could they feel the elegance of the layout. What kind of store is this? Gucci. Gucci doesn't seem to be a brand like this. 4G letters around a square. Also, wasn't Gucci supposed to be selling bags? Although Poplar Fruit had read a lot of books, he really didn't know anything about fashion. Or rather, his understanding of fashion only existed on the surface. In order not to expose his ignorance, Poplar Fruit quietly pulled up a piece of clothing and looked at the label. Givenchy. Oh, Poplar Fruit understood. It was Givenchy. It was a French brand. He had read about it when he was learning French. But it seemed that Givenchy was very expensive. Poplar Fruit remembered that it was one of the top brands in the fashion industry. Moreover, it was a big foreign brand. How could it be cheap? Zheng Yujie saw him looking at the clothes and explained to him, "Don't be fooled by these clothes. These suits are very nice. Armani's clothes are too businesslike. I don't think you're an old man, so you shouldn't dress so lifelessly. Givenchy is more lively. It's good that it's expensive. It looks good and comfortable. The big brands are very particular about the materials they use. You don't have to worry about money. This time, Big Sister will pay for all your expenses. Moreover, I have a platinum membership card from Givenchy. 20% off. Zhang Yujie waved her finger in front of Poplar Fruit. Hey, where's my card? She wanted to take out her platinum membership card to show Poplar Fruit, but she couldn't find it in her bag for a long time. Zhang Yujie was obviously a regular customer of this store. When she walked in, the store manager replaced the other sales ladies to welcome her. The manager was a beautiful woman in her 30s. She was dressed very maturely. When she walked, her tight skirt wrapped around her perky buttocks shook slightly. It made people feel that the surrounding air was heating up. Little sister Yujie, you haven't been here for a month. I missed you so much. The manager held Zhang Yujie's hand and said affectionately. When she saw Poplar Fruit carrying a baby, her eyes couldn't help but reveal a hint of surprise. However, she concealed it very well. She didn't even show any curiosity about Poplar Fruit's identity, showing excellent professionalism. Aya, Big Sister Fang, it's great that you're here. I don't even know who took my platinum membership card. Zhang Yujie laughed. Look at what you're saying. Isn't the card just a symbol? If I'm not in the store, people won't recognize you. I say, you can come whenever you want in the future. Don't worry about not bringing your card. Your appearance is the proof. The manager called Big Sister Fang rebuked. She chatted happily with Zhang Yujie. She even asked the girls under her to bring water to Poplar Fruit, not neglecting him. Zhang Yujie smiled and introduced them to each other. Big Sister Fang, this is Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit, this is Fang Minute, Big Sister Fang. She's a good friend of mine and the manager of this store. She didn't know whether it was intentional or not, but she didn't introduce her relationship with Poplar Fruit like she did with Fang Minute. After greeting each other, Zhang Yujie pulled Fang Minute and asked her to find the best suit for Poplar Fruit. Fang Minute covered her mouth and laughed. No problem, little sister Yujie. Just wait. I'll find him the most handsome suit. Yanghua listened to her instructions and handed Chichi, who was sleeping soundly on her back, to Zhang Yujie to take care of. She then stood up and followed Fang Minute to the men's section. Wow, you're so tall. Fang Minute said exaggeratedly. If she didn't stand up straight, she wouldn't know. Poplar Fruit was really tall. She used her hand to compare the height of her head to Poplar Fruit and found that she just reached Poplar Fruit's chest. Fang Min's figure was more like a southerner. She estimated that she was about 1.6 meters tall and wore a pair of high heels that were about 7 or 8 centimeters high. Compared to Poplar Fruit, who was now 1.87 meters tall, she was still more than 20 centimeters short. When Fang Minute compared their height, she was almost leaning on Poplar Fruit. Although Poplar Fruit didn't feel that there was anything wrong with it, Zhang Yujie was a little unhappy. Her eyes were fixed on Fang Min's chest that was pressed against Poplar Fruit's, and her face showed signs of turning cloudy. The older the ginger, the spicier it was. Fang Min's action was a little exaggerated, but she had an ulterior motive. When she saw Zhang Yujie's nervous expression, there was a flash of pride and understanding in her eyes. Sure enough, there was a girl involved. Of course, she didn't dare to play too much. After getting the information she was curious about, she immediately distanced herself from Poplar Fruit and started to arrange clothes for Poplar Fruit with a serious face. This made Zhang Yujie's tense expression ease up. She hugged Kiki and watched quietly from the side. What size clothes do you wear? Fang Minute asked. Poplar Fruit scratched his head and said awkwardly, I forgot. He really didn't know. Previously, when he was growing taller, many of the clothes he bought didn't fit him. Later on, he deliberately bought a bigger size and wore them loosely. Slowly, they fit him. In the 2 months that he had been translating sect leader Qiao's autobiography, Poplar Fruit's height slowly stabilized. However, after he stopped growing, Poplar Fruit didn't buy any new clothes. Fang Minute looked at him speechlessly and thought, could it be that he's a young master from some family? He doesn't even know how to buy clothes. But that can't be right. How can a young master wear clothes from a street stall? Of course, Fang Minute didn't show her unspoken criticism on her face. She still smiled and picked out a few clothes from a row, then compared them with Poplar Fruit's upper body. Finally, Fang Minute picked out a pure white base. The collar, sleeves, and buttons were embroidered with unique patterns. It looked simple and elegant. She also found a suitable pair of black trousers and a belt. She smiled and said, "Go change into this shirt first. Put on the shirt, then I'll find a suit for you." You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.